Good morning. And for those of you that are viewing, my mask is right here, and if you'll notice the way we're seated, we're practicing the social distancing, but I think for communication purposes throughout the meeting I've taken my mask off, but it's here and I think we've got adequate distance, so we would encourage the public to take the same precautions. We'll call the meeting to order for July the 14th of the Corpus Christi City Council. And if you'll join me in prayer, and I'd like to, the first 30 seconds, if we would, we'll just have a moment of silence. We've lost two public servants for the city of Corpus Christi, one a police officer and one a security officer out at the airport. Our condolences to the family. But I think what this does, it brings it home even closer that this coronavirus is a non-discriminatory enemy. It doesn't care about your age, it doesn't care about your sex, it doesn't care about your ethnicity. It's a warrior we can't see, but it's attacking. And so we just want to bring this, I think it comes home pretty close today when we realize that two public service folks, we don't know where the origin of their contracting the virus was, whether it was on their official duty or whether it's in their private time when they're doing their goings and comings as a private citizen. But the virus has no time clock. They don't care whether you're on duty or off duty. And so for the first 30 seconds of our prayer, let's just take a moment in silence and remember their families and others in the community that have suffered loss. Our Father, we come to you today asking that you would comfort the families that have lost these that we've mentioned and others in our community. Comfort them and guide them as only you can. Continue to give us strength to fight this virus, to take the steps necessary to give us the wisdom and the knowledge to make the decisions that are right to protect life and property in our community. We pray for the opportunity that you've given us to be in a position of leadership to make the right decisions and help us to do just that, make the right decisions. Guide us and keep us safe in all that we do, and we pray for our governor, and we pray for the president and his advisors, and the governor and his advisors, and our advisors on the local level, that our goal is to protect the health and safety of the community in which we serve. Guide us now through this council meeting, that again we make the right decisions in the best interest of our community. These things we ask in your name. Amen. Join me in the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Ms. Huerta, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Joe McComb.
Here.
Council members Roland Barrera.
Here.
Rudy Garza.
Here.
Paulette Guajardo. Gil Hernandez.
Here.
Michael Hunter.
Here.
Ben Molina.
Here.
Everett Roy.
Present.
Greg Smith.
Here.
City Manager Peter Zanoni.
Here.
City Attorney Miles Risley. Here. Mayor and Council, a quorum of the Council and the required charter officers are present to conduct the meeting.
Thank you, ma'am. I didn't get any public comment. Did we have any public comment submitted?
Yes, sir, we did. We had written public comments submitted. We also have an individual who would like to call in.
Okay. Is it for a particular agenda item or just
Yes.
general public?
Yeah, well, there was general public comment. There was also public comment related to item 18.
Okay.
And the individual who will be calling is calling related to item 21. It's the Botanical Gardens item.
Okay.
And 18 was the Walker Holdings item, the developer participation agreement.
Okay,
So
but
those
for
are the
general public comment,
Yes, sir.
non-specific items, we have one?
No, sir, we had quite a few of those.
Okay,
So
and
those
you-
were submitted.
Okay, well, or did I miss getting one? Get it?
Yeah, we'll
right.
provide you a packet if you didn't receive it.
Okay,
My
I don't
apologies.
recall, I don't see it, and I don't, before today. But anyway, we'll get it and take a look at it, and we
Yes, sir.
appreciate people submitting that. And the others are agenda-specific?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Before we go do the city manager's report, I'd
Well,
like,
if you'd give me an opportunity for the call-in. So we do have, and they're going to call in right now at this.
oh, for
turn.
general public?
Yes, one person is going to be
Oh,
calling.
okay, excuse me, I
Yes.
misunderstood you.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
go.
So just one moment, let me get that. Oh, you think he took, okay. You can have this one.
Oh, is this it?
No, there's the.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, Mayor and Council, we have public comment from Gloria Hicks. She resides at 5226 Greenbrier, and she'll be talking about item number 21. Okay, Ms. Hicks.
Good morning. On behalf of the South Texas Botanical Gardens and Nature Center Board of Directors, I'd like to ask for your support of item 21 on the agenda today. The Botanical Gardens resides on 182 acres of city parkland leased to our nonprofit organization. Since 1996, the gardens have built more than $2.7 million in improvements through donations and grants. Approval of this project will provide ADA access to our nature trails, which currently are grass and mulch. This grant will double the paved portion of nature trails and thus increase the trail use for exercise and tourism and many more activities. The gardens are a great asset to the city, and the approval of this Type B grant will triply impact and make the gardens a premier facility. We appreciate your support, and I want to thank you all for our city, what you do during these unsettling times. I know you're very busy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor, and that concludes our public comment today.
All right. Then, before we get into the city manager's report, just for commendations and proclamations, wanted to remind folks that July the 13th through the 17th is National Disability Voter Registration Week. This is the 30th anniversary of Americans for Disabilities Act, and I think over the years we've seen it evolve. It really does make mobility a lot friendlier today than it was 50 years ago or 30 years ago. And they say there's over 50 million people with some type of disability that this has been able to assist. And so just National Disability Voter Registration Week, 13th through the 17th, and we're glad to do that and wanted to remind you of it. Mr. Zanoni, you have city manager's comments and update on city operations.
Yes, yes, sir, Mayor and members of the council. We're going to begin, I have just a couple of things this morning. We're going to begin, though, by having our Public Health Director, Annette Rodriguez, provide a quick update on COVID-19. She's here live in person, and we're going to have her come up to the microphone and just provide the council and the community with an update on COVID-19.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Annette Rodriguez, Health Director. So I'm just going to give you a brief update on where we are. And so at the Health District, I wanted to start out by kind of just showing some statistics, and I think everybody has seen these. Next slide. So for the U.S., we have over 3 million cases throughout the United States and over 137,000 deaths. In Texas, we have 264,313 cases and 3,235 deaths. Next slide. For Nueces County specifically, if you start from the bottom of this bar graph, in April we had 3 that passed away due to COVID-19. In May, 0. In June, 5. And for the last 13 days in July, we've had 50. Next slide. So what we were looking at the ages of these individuals here in Nueces County. And so we put this graph together, and what we were really trying to figure out is like the individuals that we say that are super spreaders. And so we looked at what we had, gathered our data, and we have PCR is going to be the blue bar graph, and then the orange is the antibody, the serology positive cases. So while we don't count them as cases, we were looking just to compare to see how closely they correlated with each other. We still have them in the office, so we're looking at them. And they correlate very closely together. And so if you look at the graph, less than 15 years of age, 363 in that age group. We did the age 16 to 25 because we believe that's the age group that's now they can drive and, you know, they can kind of live their life, so to speak. They've started college, they're in that age group where they kind of have that free will. And so we lumped a little bit of a larger group in there. And then 26 to 30, while that's only a 5-year age span, we put that one there. 30 to 40, 40 to 50, so on and so forth. What's interesting is that you see from 70 to 80, very few cases. So 215 from 80 to 90, 81, and then very few in the 90 to 100. But the 16 to 25 is a very large number. And I think the next slide depicts it a little better. My assistant director created this slide. I think it's an excellent slide. It's got the the circular movement of these people that are positive. But what I really like that stands out to me is you would see everybody kind of evenly distributed, but you don't. You see the 16 to 25 and the 30 to 40 that kind of stick out of those peaks, if you will. And those are what we call the super spreaders. These individuals have higher numbers than the rest of the chart. And so we believe that those individuals, those age groups, are more actively spreading the virus. Next slide, please. So what is the health district actually still doing, besides still counting positives and contact tracing and everything else that you've heard that we've been doing, and trying to make sure that people realize that they need to stay home, if at all possible, wash their hands often, social distance, wear a mask when they're out. We just started where we're handing out low-dose steroids for people that are COVID-19 positive. These are for individuals that actually have shortness of breath, they're having coughs, they're actually maybe struggling to get into the hospital or to get in to see their physician. So we do have these prescriptions available for them. So it's not a substitute for medical care. If they need that, they still need to get it. So, and this is definitely not a cure. It's just a 5-day low-dose steroid to kind of help them in the interim. Next slide. So our phone banks, we've talked about this several times. In March, we had about 6,000 calls. In April, over 4,000. In May, 3,000. Kind of started settling down, we thought, in May. We started reopening May 1st. May 22nd, we opened the bars. In June, 11,800. In July, in 13 days, 6,662 calls. So for a total of 32,621 calls, specifically for COVID-19. Next slide. So really the plea today is because of the number of cases, the number of hospitalizations, the number of individuals in the ICU, the number of people on the vent, we do still desperately need convalescent plasma. And so a lot of people are saying, well, you have to have a negative after you've had a positive. That was way back when, not anymore. If you've been positive and now you're recovered for at least the 14 days, you can give blood. So there really is a need for this blood. You know, we always say the men, you give blood today, it can be in the hospital as early as tomorrow. And so again, we have over 300 people hospitalized right now. Many of them are critical, and we need the blood. We are giving, the blood bank they're giving $50 gift certificates to individuals that are donating blood. And so we encourage everybody that has recovered to go in and donate this blood to help these individuals in the hospital. Next slide. So a lot of us are asking, I'm getting a lot of emails about, there's all these supplies now that are suddenly available. So PCR kits, et cetera, and I'm sending all of these to our lab, to our microbiologist, to our laboratory manager. And basically what she's saying is a lot of what they have available is what we currently have. They have the swabs and they have the VTM, but they don't have the backside of it. They don't have the part to analyze. That's the part that we still need. So the nucleic acid kits, the kits actually to do the analyzing. And then some are specific for certain machines that we don't have. We do have the Panther. We did get an additional grant funding for $1.4 million, and that's going to help with some of these supplies as well. So, next slide. So finally, just reminding everybody, the best way to break the chain of transmission for COVID-19 is to distance yourself. So if you can distance yourself at least the 6 feet, further is even better. That's going to be the best way, to not get COVID-19. So, do y'all have any questions?
I don't see any questions, but let me say.
Mayor,
Excuse me?
this is Councilman Hernandez. I'd have a question.
All right.
Yes, Annette, thank you for corresponding with me earlier this last week regarding treatment options. If you can you let us know when you'll be able to give us a report on some of the treatment options that have been tested?
So I know that you had asked about the inhalers, and so I did reach out to the alternate local health authority as well as the health authority. And one of the concerns was that while it really hadn't been tested, they're actually utilizing some of it in the hospital, but also there was a very, very hefty cost to those inhalers. And so that was one of the concerns that they had, but they are still trying them in the hospitals to find out, how effective they are.
Well, some of those inhalers or corticosteroid inhaled corticosteroids are generic, and those have been used in the past in other locations. How is there additional costs associated with that? And this is for treatment outside the hospital, not in the hospital. Can you kind of give some details on that?
Basically what they told me, and again, I'm not claiming to be a physician, but they basically said that that's actually very specific. That corticosteroid that you're speaking of, it actually aims directly at the lung, which is actually exactly where you want it to go, versus the low dose steroid that we provide is more systemic, so it goes throughout the body. But again, you don't really, the ones that they're doing, they're treating them in the hospital. They're not actually treating them outside the hospital. And so while other places may be doing that, maybe it's because of the vulnerable population that we have, the physicians do not feel comfortable at this point to start that process yet.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mayor, it's Roland.
Okay.
Yeah, Annette, or I guess Peter, at what point are we going to, that was actually a great piece that you had on there, or a great illustration of the confirmations divided up by age. At what point are we going to include that on the website, the city website, where it has all the statistics?
We can put that on today. This is a new presentation format, and so sure, I thought it was really nicely done as well.
Okay.
We'll put it on our website today, Councilman.
Okay, that'd be great. And just one more thing I'd like to add, I guess, once again, being in the health insurance industry, Humana just sent out something this morning that all the carriers are sending out items, what to do if you think you have COVID for employers as well as, but one of the things I heard this morning is they're utilizing their teledoc system, which is called Doctor on Demand. And so an individual can do a risk assessment online for COVID, and then they contact the doctor on demand and then the doctor on demand can set them up with an exam by through their lab, and they could set up an appointment versus the challenges that we face where we've obviously got, you know, hundreds of people that come up and get in line. It's just, you know, I'm sure that you're probably asking people what other resources that they have that are available to them, rather than, because this is something that I've counseled several of our clients on, is that have you utilized your telemed or your teledoc type of system to find out, to follow the next step? And it's just, I've met with other individuals that do not know that they have that benefit. And, you know, so just something to consider if we're counseling individuals on that, of what does your private insurance cover? And have you looked at that avenue? But I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you so much.
Anything else, Mr. Molina?
Yes, I've got one.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Annette. You mentioned the Texas cases, and how is Nueces County doing relative to Texas and relative to the United States as a percentage of our population?
So what we're seeing still currently is we're seeing between a 30 and 40% positive rate. And that we're really looking at because of our drive-throughs that we're having. And so that's still, you know, very high, and those numbers can definitely be improved. And that's really what we're really trying to stress to the community, how if they do their part, we're all going to be so much better off, because if we can stop one individual from spreading this virus, then we can spread others. We can stop others from spreading.
And how are we doing on active cases relative to the state and the nation? Our county, Nueces County.
I have not actually compared that today, but I know that the state of Texas is also, you know, not doing poorly. I mean, it's doing poorly, because I guess Nueces County and others like us, the Valley, you know, we're all having these same issues. But I definitely will look at that closer and give you that information back.
Well, and one reason I'm asking is we were on the New York Times is one of the hottest counties in the nation, and you know, our public needs to know where we're sitting on there. Are we doing good? Are we not doing good? And if the New York Times is correct, and we're one of the most infected counties, we need to know about that.
I agree.
Okay, and thank you for everything you're doing. I want to make one that our healthcare professionals out there, I know you all are working 24/7, and we've had 58 tragedies so far, but you guys are doing a wonderful job, and if we look at our mortality numbers, we're really looking pretty good there, and thank you all so very much for everything you're doing.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Just a clarification. When you said 30%, that's of our testing. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, as a population, that would be about 1.5%, I think.
Right.
One and a
No,
half to two.
I'm
Maybe
just-
not 2%, but about 1.5.
Right.
In
just-
terms of our positives to our population. So I didn't want people to think 30% of our population is infected.
No.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
1.7%.
Say what?
1.7% is confirmed infection.
For an old man, 1 to 2% is pretty good. Okay.
And Mayor, can I add one more thing before you go from out in the hitherland?
Yes, sir.
You know, just one other thing. I know I visited with staff, and you know, I read an article in The Economist. God forbid I'm turning into a Gil Hernandez of coming up with all these details, and all of a sudden I'm an expert. No, I'm sorry, Gil. But you know, I've heard I've heard that the best way to open back the economy is through contact tracing, and I know we just hired a bunch of people, and I know staff is working overtime, and you know, I commend them for doing so. And you know, I just want to reiterate that we really need to, and I know staff, and I talked to Peter Collins, in fact, yesterday, that they're pursuing all sorts of technology to do this contact tracing. And, you know, I think it's the best opportunity so that we can take an inventory of our community, and it gets out in real time to individuals. And if people will voluntarily get on this system, then they could get like an email alert or an Amber alert, almost the same thing, as saying, there was an individual that tested positive and they were at, such and such a grocery store. I'm not going to mention anyone, but if you were there on that day, it's highly likely that you should do a risk assessment. And it's a great way to inform the community of where individuals have been and may have been, so that way they can be cautious rather than us, just going through this somewhat, antiquated system of trying to remember everything. I made a comment in the audit committee. If we're using Excel spreadsheets to determine the items, then, chances are we're behind the times. And, I know your people are working overtime and they're really committed to what they're doing, but we as a council should recognize that if we need to invest in technology, that we need to do so quickly, because it can really make our community safer and help us open our economy.
Thank you. And just a note, Councilman, we did receive a letter yesterday from Department of State Health Services, Dr. Hellerstadt, and he sent us all a letter basically saying that after this Thursday, the 16th, that the Texas Health Trace that also does contact tracing, that if we had more than 50 that we were contact tracing per day, anything over 50, the state was going to take over and they were going to catch up and make sure that all of those individuals were contact traced. So that's a great advantage that we're very grateful for, and also that any platforms that we use, and we've been looking at a few of them, thank you for that, but we've been looking at these as well, any platforms that we use, that they are going to be able to speak to each other, so that way we can keep up with the statistics that we have here locally.
Excellent, excellent. Keep up the good work. I know it's tough out there.
Thank you.
Just one comment on the contact tracing. I mean, that, and I don't mean to be critical, and it's not critical of the local people. I mean, it's that, in some instances, because of our explosion in numbers, that really has gotten to be a feel-good thing that we're trying to contact all these people. The problem that we have, and it's not your fault, the problem we have is I can't remember what I ate for lunch the day before yesterday, much less where I was or who I ran into. With the delay from the time a person takes a test until they get a result, unless they happen to get it here, is ranging anywhere from 7 to 10 to 14 days. Now, let me just ask you, Rudy, where were you last Thursday?
Here, municipal court meeting.
So, I mean, it sounds good. It's got a lot of sex appeal with the public that we're tracking all these people. You're asking us, or we're asking you, really, to do the impossible. Now, if it's a group that went somewhere on a trip, you might be able to remember that. But I don't think we ought to diminish our efforts. But until we can close that gap between the test and the result, the contact tracing is really, every hour that goes by is less and less and less effective. And so, and hoping, and we had a great meeting with NIM Kid and some others about additional supplies, and they were wonderful, and they're doing everything they can to get them for us. But people just need to understand that contact tracing, it sounds like a good thing, but with the delays from the test to the result, if that gap isn't narrowed quickly, I mean, with the kind of numbers we've got, we don't have enough people to contact all these things. So anyway, Mr. Garza, you were next. I called on you. Can you remember where you were 5 minutes ago?
Yes, sir, I was right here. Annette, again, thanks for all your efforts. I know you guys are doing a great job. And we're following a playbook that was kind of outlined by the CDC. The question, I've got similar concerns, and you talked about the age groups that are most prevalent in spread. You talked about super spreaders. And when he talked about contact tracing, and if we got the capacity to do 50, and we got numbers of 400 that are coming up positive in a day, then every day we're falling behind being able to do that effort, even if the state comes along and is helping us. With young folks, if they think they got it and they're waiting on the results, they're not sitting at home. They're not sitting at home until they actually find out that they're positive. And by then, more than likely, they're already over it. And so the question that I've got is there any discussion, any strategy in moving forward with these kind of numbers and these kind of challenges that we have, particularly among young people? Is there any strategy for moving some of the efforts from testing over to, testing is to try to prevent the community spread. At some point, my feeling is that pre-treatment, before people actually go into the emergency rooms or into the hospitals or into the ICU, get to a point where they get ICU, they're going to get real sick before they want to go because they're afraid they're not going to be treated. There's too many people that are infected. Is there any strategy for moving some of those efforts from testing over into some sort of pre-treatment that you can actually provide, whether it be steroids, whether it be some sort of elixir, something that might help them get to a point where their lungs are not totally incapacitated, where they're going to be looking at ventilators and stuff like that.
Yes.
Has that been done in any other communities across the
And
country?
we actually started a couple of weeks ago with the nursing home facilities, basically putting standing orders in place. And just for that exact reason, for whatever purpose of reason, if they can't get into a hospital, they're backed up, there's a 20-hour wait, and they can't get in, we put in standing orders with all of the different treatments that they need to go ahead and start at the bedside. So that's in a nursing home facility or an assisted living facility. So we put those in. In fact, we went ahead and went the extra mile, and we put in also for convalescent plasma at the bedside. The issue is with the convalescent plasma is if there's not enough for the critically ill in the ICU, there's not enough for everyone in the nursing homes. We know that. And so, but we still have those protocols in place. We also put them in place for the jail, for the annex. Same types of protocols, because if 87 out of 90 tested positive, and if 50% of those individuals end up getting sick enough to go to the hospital, again, we're not helping the already overburdened healthcare system. And so we're putting those in place. We're also putting those same low-dose steroids that you mentioned in place, like today through the drive-through. Everybody that went through the drive-through received one of those.
Okay.
I will tell you, though, that we are having some issues with the pharmacies not wanting to take the scripts that we have them, like on the way we have them on a form. And so we're going to have to revamp that so they can actually accept them. But we can call in that script for those individuals. It's just we're trying to find a way to do the majority of the population, quickly. And so we are looking at different things. The other thing that we all started on Sunday night was we started calling all of the positives that we had, and we started offering them vitamins. And so because the new literature says that if you're taking, big doses of vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc, and even baby aspirin for those individuals that are COVID positive that actually have high blood pressure or hypertension, we started telling them what the new dose should be for them for baby aspirin, so you don't see them with heart attacks or strokes, because that disease can actually cause some of that. So yes, we are starting, and we have been moving. That's kind of where we've been going. We've had to adjust.
At the end of the day, I just want to say thank you and your staff for all your efforts and all the medical professionals out there that are trying to give our folks, a chance to survive that terrible disease. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Molina?
Thank you. Annette, we appreciate all your hard work. I know that it is a daunting task, and we just appreciate everything that your team is doing.
Thank you.
I mentioned last week that I've had several community members reach out to offer their facilities that aren't being in use currently because of the current situation that we're in. And hopefully we don't have to come to that, but I know I've sent Peter some information about hotels that are offering rooms for our use, other facilities that are offering their large parking lots, and other facilities that are just offering their open spaces to us for storage or setting up anything that we need to set up. And hopefully, again, I hope it doesn't come to that, but I hope that that is something that your team is discussing and considering moving forward. And also, you mentioned about different test kits that are coming out, and I've been in contact with a vendor, and I had some sample kits delivered to your office yesterday
That's
for your
correct.
medical team to evaluate. Do you know about when they would go through that evaluation and make any type of decision?
They actually did evaluate them, and so it was that, I think we had talked about a short time period, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. It was closer to the 4 hours, which really wasn't the concern to us. The bigger concern was that it was missing the component of where we actually analyze. So it was more for the front end where you're doing the drive-through, which right now we're set up with the Department of State Health Services where they actually provide us with 750 of those kits every week. So we're on a rotation. Every Thursday we receive those. So that's not really where our need is. Our need is really to actually be able to analyze 750 because we have enough nucleic acid. And that wasn't part of this. That was just the front end.
Okay.
And so that's where we are.
Okay, and if there's anything else that I come across that I think might be helpful to you, I'll send it your way.
Thank you.
And also, so I've had several people reach out, and they're asking about another stay-at-home order, or if that's either going to come from us or from the governor. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I haven't, but, I think we saw from Dr. Bird, people don't need an order from the governor to do, what's right for them. So I think that that's the attitude that you should have. So if it's not yourself that you're protecting, I don't know who you are protecting other than your family members. So it's your duty to stay as healthy as you can. If you're vulnerable, not to go out. And so if you don't have to go out, don't. Just stay home and just kind of wait until, we get closer to having some type of medication that we can actually give out to the community or the vaccine. That would be my message. So I don't think we need to wait on what the governor tells us to do. Everybody knows what they need to do to stay safe.
Just personally, I'm the designated shopper at home, and so I go out and I do the grocery shopping and get whatever we need. And I know that my family, even though that I've got young ones and they're full of energy and they want to get out, they're spending a lot of time at home right now. And so that's something that we're doing just at my house. So I appreciate all you're doing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Wartho?
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the mayor's point on the time that we test versus the time, or not versus, but the time in between someone tests and when they get the results back. So ideally, yes, it'd be wonderful if we can speed everything up, because that's a huge point in time where bad things could, I'm eating my mask, where bad things could be happening, right? The spread. So I guess I would like to know, and I would assume so, but back to a conversation that I was having with Mr. Zanoni this morning, right now, the communication and the messaging is extremely important with so many, elected officials and the public and, your team, for example. But when one gets tested, is it emphasized that they should stay home regardless? I mean,
Yes.
they're told this.
Yes, definitely. And we reminded our phone banks, because I know you and I had this conversation as well. We reminded our phone banks, anytime you set up anybody for a drive-through, they have to be reminded. They're coming through our drive-through because they're symptomatic. That means they need to be at home until they get those results. And they need to be isolating themselves, quite frankly. But the military testing teams, all of them have been doing that, early on. So they've told them until you get results. Now, the problem was, as the mayor mentioned, 12 or 13 days later, and they still haven't gotten results. They're getting frustrated at this point. And but yes, we do tell them that they have to isolate themselves until the results come in. Ours, we're very fortunate. We get our results today or tomorrow at the very latest, but others aren't as fortunate. And so, yes, they do give them the same message.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Roy?
Again, I want to thank you and your staff for your continuous hard work, and especially coming up here and continuing to educate us. I believe in about 2 weeks and a few days, I know out in Cal Allen, I think August 5th is when they're supposed to start school. And then I believe CCISD is the 15th. I have a concern. I mean, I think when you think about it, one of the things that we have learned is that this COVID-19 does not have a specific target audience. You know, it will target little ones as well. It just depends on if you're in the path. So with that, we're going to have a large population that is going to be active that wasn't active before. And that's a concern. And I just wondered, is there anything that you're doing, any conversation that you've had with the school districts in terms of preparing for that? I think that's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, Councilman, yesterday, the mayor and myself convened a Webex with all 6 superintendents of the 6 school districts in the city limits. And the mayor led the meeting. It was a very good meeting in terms of having that conversation. In summary, all superintendents agreed to work collectively with the city as a community to figure out this issue. We told them, and we know, you all know, especially if you have children or grandchildren, that that's probably topic number 1 on a lot of families' minds, which is, what are we going to do about school? And so we're working with them to see how they can manage the mandates that come down from the Texas Education Agency, but in a safe way. We talked about remote learning, we talked about start dates, we talked about options for parents and families, and we'll be continuing to work with them this week. We hope to have an announcement this week in terms of what is the plan for the community. That would include options of distance learning or learning at home, and then eventually getting into the classroom. But they were all in agreement that we want to do a uniform approach, not have one school district do something that's different than the next school district, just for make it for simplicity and ease of understanding across the community. I don't know, Mayor, if you want to add anything else. They were real glad that the city, it was the mayor's idea that the city approached them, and we began that dialogue. Judge Canales was engaged as well, but Mayor, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, no, it was a good meeting, and there was a extremely high level of willingness to cooperate. They all realize the significance of the community impact of this, and we basically, if there's, because you're hearing rumors that El Paso passed something and Laredo passed something. Well, it sounds good on the outside, but if you look at what the reading is, it's a feel-good resolution. We don't have any authority to tell the schools what to do and what not to do, but our communication to them was, what can we do to help you move this process forward in the most constructive way for the community? And they were very receptive to our suggestions and willingness to work with them. They've got a huge mountain to climb on getting schools back open, but they were very receptive. And we said, well, if you want anything from us in terms of an official resolution, or if there's something we can do, we need to know by Friday so that we can post it on our agenda for next Tuesday, or it could be an order from the mayor if it comes up sooner. But they were very responsive, and I think probably we'll hear from them before Friday because they're trying to get a handle on it too. But it was a very good meeting, and I've got my office now trying to set up a meeting with the private schools and the church-related schools to see. I don't think we have any, or the TEA doesn't have any, and I don't know, I think charter schools come under the TEA, but I'm not sure about religious
Right,
related.
charter schools do, but not the
Religious
parochial
school.
or private schools.
So we're trying to, at least make communication with them and tell them this looks like the direction that the ISDs are going, and just so you'll know, and for your planning purposes, we're hoping to get that set up today for a meeting tomorrow morning with those folks. But let them know we're working, and we should have an answer. But it was a very positive meeting, and like I said, the judge was on it because I think the county schools also are planning, or they're smaller districts, but they still got the same concerns about parents and students and teachers.
My only add to that is I don't want to forget the community college and universities here too, because I think yeah, as we approach that fall time, there could be an impact there. So I hope you keep those.
I think we are going to contact Delmar
Yeah.
and A&M Corpus.
Right,
Okay.
that came up as well in the conversation yesterday.
Right.
Well, thank you for
Yes, sir.
your proactiveness. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, Annette, we appreciate it, and I don't mean to make your head grow so big you can't get out the door back there, but I cannot tell you the number of comments I've heard from around the community that how much they appreciate the information you're providing, the calmness in which you provide it, the quality of the information you're providing. You're very calming and communicative to the community, and they say that you are really doing an excellent job, and I just wanted to pass that on to you because I know you're working 24/7, and you're probably worn out, but you're doing a great job, and the public recognizes that, and I just wanted to share that with you.
Well,
So
thank
thank
you,
you very
Mayor.
much for all your efforts.
I appreciate that, so,
Thank you. All right, hang in there.
thank you. I'll go back to work.
All right.
Thanks,
Hey, you
Annette.
look forward
Yeah,
to these, you get a little break.
Right.
All right, Mr. Manager, you
Okay,
got 30
Mayor.
seconds.
Yes, sir, just one
Just
other.
wait till you got the clock.
I'm just going to do one other quick item. That's,
All right.
yes, sir, it's kind of a good news story, and actually it was the brainchild of yourself, was your idea.
Uh-oh.
And just some background context, we know that several months ago when the pandemic first hit, many companies were laying off people. And our big company here, Bay, was one of those. They laid off a large number of employees in their oil refinery side of the business. And so that's one piece of background. The other is we know, or as a reminder, we're about 2 years behind in our street maintenance program. Most of the 2019 work never got done, and we're in 2020 and we're doing the 2020 work. So the mayor and I put two and two together and said, you know what, I wonder if Bay would hire some of those crews back to accelerate our street work so we can get caught up, because we're essentially a whole 12 to 16 months behind. And so we reached out to the leadership at Bay, and I really want to thank them. Bob Blair, you all probably know, Keith Ackley, and Kevin Stone with the leadership team we worked with, and we proposed that concept to them. Would you be willing to hire back some of your employees that you furloughed or let go because of the pandemic and the economic downturn, bring them back and help us get caught up in our street work? We had the capacity to do so under a prior approved contract that the council approved. And so they agreed to do that. And they've been working. We want to highlight it to the council and the community. What that means is that in the 2-year program, we have the 19 and the 20-year program. That's $28 million worth of street preventative maintenance work. This is like overlays and the thin seals for a total of 104 projects. That would have taken the contractors until May of 2022, right? So almost, several months, from a 24-month period from May of 2022. Instead, we'll be able to get all that work done by August of 2021. And so that's a shaving of 8 months, a reduction in time of 8 months by doing this partnership project with Bay. And it's really a win-win. What it does is it brings people back to work. The employees that they brought back to work had a choice to take unemployment, but they said to Bay leadership, we want to work. We want to help the community. We want to go to work every day. They probably could have made more in unemployment, in fact, was one of the comments they told us. So we thank those 105 crew members that have come back to work for Bay. And what that means for the community is we're getting those over 100 street projects done 8 months sooner than we otherwise would. That means a big relief to the traveling public in the community, and it demonstrates the strong partnership that we have with a great company here in Corpus Christi, Bay Limited. So we want to thank them and just highlight to the community that, amidst all the downturn and the doom and gloom, there's some glimmers of hope out there. And so we're thankful for them. I did want to also mention that our in-house crews, we use both in-house crews and the contract side. Richard Martinez, our director, is here today, but our in-house crews with his leadership and his team's leadership and new training, new equipment, moving pretty quickly as well. They've completed 29 street segments, which equates to 14 lane miles already in the year. So we want to thank them. They're a valuable part of getting the streets back in shape here in Corpus. So that really concludes it for today, Mayor. And we want to thank you for the idea and for helping to move that forward with Bay.
Well, that's a great report. I was not aware of all that going on. It was kind of a wild and crazy idea at the time, but I'm glad you took the leadership and the staff. And Richard, thank you for your involvement in it. And yeah, that's getting streets done ahead of schedule is great, and saving jobs. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So thank you. Were you wanting to? I thought you were punching your button. All right, then we'll go to item number G. That finishes that city managers. The minutes. Entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes for June 23rd meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on approval of the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, you don't need to call the roll on that, do you, Ms. Wertham? Okay. Boards and commissions, we have one. That's the library board. We had two, looks like resigned. My book, Brian Soleric and Tom Kreppel. So these would be to fill the unexpired terms as well. Let's see, no. Soleric's term was up November.
2019.
Yeah, last year. Kreppel is up in November of this year, so
Right.
Soleric's would be for a full term and the other would be for 5 months, right? Unexpired term?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we have 3 names, so open up for nominations for the library board.
I'd like to nominate Kirby Tello.
Kirby Tello,
Yes.
I'd like to nominate David Watson.
all right. Any other nominations? All right, entertain a motion that the draw straws as to which one gets the
Yes.
a full term, and you just draw straws once you
Right,
get the
we
names?
randomly select. Yes,
Okay.
sir. Which one gets which?
Entertain a motion for the appointment of Kirby Tello and David Watson.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
I think the ayes have it.
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you very much. On the consent agenda, before we get to the consent agenda, I think, I don't know, well, let's see on the consent agenda. 3 through 18. Just again, want to bring recognition to the staff and their work even while we're in this pandemic. Item 3 and 4, it's both accepting grants, bringing funds into the city, so we appreciate their work on that. Consent agenda is item 3 through 18. And I think somebody wanted to pull, on the 21 was, I think, the first caller, right?
Sir?
Okay, Ms. Hicks called on 21, so we're not there yet.
Right. We
I-
did get, go ahead, Mayor.
If anybody wants to pull in, I'd suggest pulling item 18 for further discussion. Anybody have any they want to pull for further discussion?
One note, Mayor, on item 18, we do have the developer online as well.
Okay.
On that one, to answer questions when needed.
Right.
And Mr. Zanoni, number 11, is that one?
Yeah, number
Understood.
11, we're going to request to be pulled from the consent agenda.
With-
We'll bring
is
it back. Yeah, we're going to bring it back at a future day. The delivery is not possible right now of these vehicles, given the closing of some of the plants.
All right, so you're pulling 11,
Yes.
all right?
Mayor, I'd like to pull number 16, please.
All right, we're pulling 16, 18. Anybody else have a comment on 3 through, go to 19 or 18?
It's 18, Mayor.
3 through 18, we're pulling 16 and 18.
And 11 is being withdrawn.
And 11 is withdrawn, right?
Postponed.
Right.
All right, entertain a motion for items 3 through 18 with the exclusion of 11, 16, and 18. Is there a
So
motion?
moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval, consent agenda items 3 through 18 with the exception of item 11, which has been pulled, item 16 and 18 for further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Can I get a roll call? I'm sorry, Mayor.
All
on
right,
this one.
excuse me, I'm sorry.
about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Mayor McComb,
Aye.
Councilmembers Fajardo,
Aye.
Hernandez,
Aye.
Hunter,
Aye.
Molina,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Barrera,
Aye.
and Garza.
Aye.
The consent agenda passes.
All right, item number, you just want to pull item 11, we don't need to discuss it, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, item number 16. Who, huh?
Councilman Hernandez just went up back. Oh, here he is. Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, item number 16, Mr. Hernandez.
For 16,
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
can we get that item up that I put on the projector? Okay. I want to talk a little bit about this one because it seemed a little odd. If you notice here, I put three columns there, one with the original CIP budget for the street improvements. You can't see the whole thing on the image there, but the first row is the general street improvements, which includes the actual street as well as the ADA improvements and just general items. The second row there is stormwater improvements. The next one is water, wastewater, and gas is the last one. And then the bottom row is the totals. Now, obviously, when you budget something, there's, you may not hit everything you want to get to, and you kind of do an estimate. I believe it's 50% on the street, 50% in other improvements. However, that kind of the math works out. And then and then the second column is the bid amount, what the actual numbers came out to. 4 million for the actual street improvements, 1.9 million for stormwater, 782,000 for water, 11,000 for wastewater, and then 27,000 for gas. But you look at the agenda memo, how it's funded, the majority of the funding for this project comes out of stormwater, and as well as even water, it's double the amount of the actual cost for the bid amount. Now, in conversations with engineering and finance, there was some thoughts that they could have put some other stuff that was in the general improvement side into stormwater, but even then, it wouldn't have amounted to the total amount that's being pulled from the utilities department or utility funding. Now, this is going to be something the council is going to decide whether or not this is how we want to fund this project. But I think I wanted to bring it to attention that this is probably not the best way to look at this, and it was probably a reflection of some planning issues. And I'd like to get engineering to kind of explain how this all transpired.
Okay, this is Jeff Edmonds. Are you able to see me?
No, I can hear you though. Go ahead.
Okay, so I've put together a couple of slides to help explain what's going on here. So Gabe, if you could cue those slides that I gave you. This first slide is something that I just pulled off of the internet. This is a cross section of a typical urban roadway, and it kind of illustrates not only the surface improvements, but what's underground. And you can see some of the relative sizes on those, and the cost is kind of proportional to the size.
Listen in.
If you go to the next slide, Gabe. This is another cross section that we put together a couple of years ago to help illustrate how the cost breaks down between the different elements on a typical road bond project. And as you can see, typically you have some large drainage infrastructure, and it tends to be your largest subsurface element. Next slide. Let me give you a little background on this Lindale area. So this was developed at a time when it was believed that you didn't really need a lot of subsurface drainage, and that you could do a large subdivision with surface drainage. And what's happened in that area, the roads have performed very poorly, and there's been premature pavement failures, and you have problems with nuisance flooding and water standing in the roads for an extended period of time after a rainfall event. So this current project is swapping from Indiana all the way down to Texan Trail. Now, we're having to retrofit drainage in that entire length. Now, the problem was there was nowhere to drain that project within the project limits. And the slide you're looking at now is what we call a plan profile view of Chamberlain Street. So what you see in the top is, if you were looking at it from above, that's the view of the street with the improvements. And down below is the what we call the profile view, which is like if you cut the street through the middle and we're viewing it side on. And what you see down there at the bottom is the storm drain that's required to get the drainage out of this area. And we have to get the water from Swatner over to the next available drainage that's in Reed. Now that is a 42-inch storm drain that is running 10 to 11 feet deep. If you go to the next slide, that's a similar situation we had on Glazebrook. So there were two ways that we had to get the drainage out of Swatner and connect into some existing adequately sized storm drainage. Now, there was no way to construct that storm drainage in those roads, which were already pretty bad, without tearing them all to pieces. And we debated what the best way to do this was, and we concluded that the best way was to just include and improve these roads the same that we were doing the other projects that were within the project limits. Now, if you go to the next slide, this is a pie chart on how those costs typically break down. And Mr. Hernandez is correct that the storm percentage on this project is much greater than the roadway. And the reason was that we charged all of those surface improvements on Glazebrook and Chamberlain to the storm, because it was due to the storm drainage and the need to run that storm drainage off-site that we were having to go down those roads. And we did not think it'd be acceptable to the public to just try and put a big patch down the middle and leave it that way. So that was a decision that was made between engineering and streets and the design engineer, and the funding on that. There wasn't bond dollars budgeted for those surface improvements on Chamberlain and Glazebrook, and the most logical way to fund those seemed to be charge it to what was causing us to have to make those improvements, which was the storm. So that's you can turn off the slide presentation, and that kind of explains how we got where we are on that funding question.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that explanation. And I wanted the council to know that, I mean, just from a funding standpoint, this is probably not the best way to do this because we're actually using stormwater funds to improve a street. And I get how it all kind of transpired. I think this is probably something probably should have caught on the front side in terms of estimating the amount of dollars needed on the general obligation bonds. So I guess the question here, Jeff, is how is this not caught on the front side with regards to this particular project?
Well, you know, I wish we'd known it at the very beginning, but usually we go into these bond programs with limited information, and your information comes into clearer focus the further you get along in your project execution. So, yeah, this is something that wasn't really known until we got into the design process.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. I have no further questions, Mayor.
All right, anyone other have any comments on 16? I don't see any, Mr. Molina, excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Edmonds, District 2, and especially the Lindale neighborhood, thank you for you and your team's hard work on this project. Just wanted a couple of follow-up questions. This project has been a long time coming for District 2. And of course, the neighborhood is excited that it's going to happen. Can you give me, as best you can, I know you've got a timeline written in the addenda item documents, but the neighbors are really excited about having trucks in the area to start construction. What's the timeline as best as you can predict right now?
Well, so typically, if council approves the item, we send a notice of award to the contractor, and they're given a couple of weeks to produce signed contracts and their bonds and insurance, which then we review and we route and we execute. And then we'll reach out to them to schedule a pre-construction meeting. And after that, when we have some conversations with them about their schedule, we'll start some public information with the property owners about what to expect. And we're not really doing those in-person meetings now. We'll be having to find some alternate ways to get that information out. But you're looking 6 to 8 weeks before we're fully contracted, and we're scheduling that public information outreach.
Yeah, I was wondering how we were going to do that, because I know in the past that we've had meetings there at the Lindale Senior Center about projects that are happening in the area. So I'm assuming that this go around we'll probably do like a Zoom meeting or something to that effect to get the neighborhood engaged.
Yes, sir. We're going to come up with an alternate strategy on that outreach and do something that's can be safely done.
All right. Move to approve.
There's a motion and a second on item 16. I had just one other question.
Yeah, Mayor.
Just out of curiosity, the piece between Reed to Alameda, it's terrible. And we're going to be so close on Glazebrook I'm talking about, on Glazebrook. I don't know how much additional it would cost, and I don't know whether there's any sewer involved in that or water or anything else. But if there's anything that could be done between the Reed and Alameda on that Glazebrook, that would be a real benefit to that whole area. That's right, serving that Alameda shopping center, and it's just a horrible street.
Yes, sir. That was brought to our attention, Mayor, and we've looked at that both from Jeff Edmonds' standpoint in terms of the contractor doing that. It would be about 800,000 additional dollars, so it could come back. We're looking to see how we can do it.
Okay.
With the resources, it's about 400,000 for the underground utilities to connect in to the rest of the Glazebrook and Alameda, and then about 400,000 for the road. An alternate option that we're looking at is having our crews just do the surface. We could do a mill and overlay. Either way, we're committed to and we'll probably have to come back to council with some type of a change order of sorts, but we need to get that strip done. That's right by the grocery store there, by HEB and the commercial corridor.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
awful.
Yeah, so we're gonna get it done, and we'll bring a progress report back to the council.
Okay, super, thanks.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
On the project location map, you have Chamberlain and Glazebrook highlighted.
Right.
What's the purpose of that?
You see where Glazebrook stops? If you go to the right of the page to Alameda, that's the piece we're talking about. It's not highlighted. But that's the piece that's in real bad shape. In between that white, that big white thing is the HEB. So Glazebrook, east over to Alameda is that segment that's not included. It's not highlighted in red. And what we're saying is we want to do that, and we've reevaluated it, and we're looking for financial resources. That'll complete that. So if somebody's coming on Alameda and taking that left or right on Glazebrook, it'll be a good treatment, brand new road all the way over to Swantner, and vice versa. If they're leaving Swantner, we don't want them to drive over a reconditioned Glazebrook and then hit all that bad section getting to Alameda. So we're going to find the funds, and we have two options. One, we'll have the contractor that's being awarded the contract to handle it for us, and another option is to have the city crews do it, and we'll determine that as time progresses and let the council know.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, there's a motion, I think. I'll second. Was there a second already? Okay. Did you get who seconded it?
Greg.
Smith?
Okay. All right. Motion and second on item 16. Ms. Worth, you want to call the roll?
Yes, sir. So for passage of motion 16, Mayor McComb?
Aye.
Council members Guajardo?
Aye.
Hernandez?
Aye.
Hunter?
Aye.
Molina,
Aye.
Roy?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Barrera?
Aye.
And Garza?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, the next item is item 18. I asked for that. Did anyone else have any comment or want to make some comment on it?
The only comment, Mr. Roy will be abstaining from this item, just so you know, Mayor.
Okay, Councilman Roy is abstaining. On item 18, I don't know whether it would be better to pull it so we could have some
We do have,
discussion, or we just vote on it. I can be honest with you, if I'm forced to vote on it, I'm gonna vote no, until I get some further information.
yeah, Mayor, we have Al Raymond, our Development Services Director, has a presentation that we'd like to show the council.
Okay,
So if you'd.
well, I'll be interested in his presentation, but the thing that bothers me, and evidently the presentation is not gonna change the recommendation, or at least the information that they've provided. It says staff recommends approval. I don't have any problem with that. What I do have a problem with is their approval, although the request is not in accordance with the UDC section 8.4 of the city participation, street or drainage crossing, and 3 bags full, is that every time we have an issue come up, everybody complains about the UDC. Can't understand it, don't do this, don't do that. Either we go by what the UDC says we do, or we get rid of it. And, because everybody's got to be able to play by the same rules. What other development project have we done that we've just completely waived the UDC and given them money to do their project? Have you got a list of those?
A list of the EDC changes or projects that have been done?
Well, I mean, it says they're not in accordance
Al
with the UDC, and then we're gonna give them 600 or whatever that amount of money is.
Well, Al will be able to answer both those. This is,
Okay, yeah, but I mean, my feeling is, and I'm not real impressed with the UDC, but if we're gonna have rules that everybody's gotta live by,
yeah.
everybody ought to have to live by them, or we just do away with them.
Yeah, we're in the process, you may recall, of updating the EDC. We added a resources in this budget the current year to do that. So there's a staff member dedicated instead of hiring an outside consultant that may not
Okay,
be familiar
well,
with it.
let's hear the
Yeah.
presentation, but
Yeah, and can I just preface Al's presentation, which is, despite that note, Mayor, this is a good news project for the community, because what it does is provides new housing construction for new families that can live in Cal Allen, who quite possibly will be working at the new Steel Dynamics plant. And Lance Walker, who's on the phone, may want to speak as well after our presentation, but we worked with him, and he has accelerated this work and has put his own time in so that housing will be ready for workers who will be working soon at the Steel Dynamics plant. And with that, let me have Al Raymond go through his presentation. And Al, also address the mayor's concern, if you can, on the UDC issue that you have noted here.
Sorry, that may be. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Gabriel, will you bring up the presentation? Okay, recruitment guys. Okay, hello everyone. This Mayor and Council. This is Al Raymond, Director of Development Services. The purpose of this resolution is to enter into a streets and drainage participation agreement with Walker Holdings and Development LLC for $698,177.56. Next slide. This slide shows the preliminary plat for the Cal Allen South subdivision, which consists of 7 units. The area highlighted in red that represents unit number 1. Walker Holdings Development is part of the city's housing initiative encouraging development in the Cal Allen area, which will allow the city to provide residential single-family housing for the new Steel Dynamics plant currently being built in Sinton, Texas. Corpus Christi's northwest corridor is a prime location for new employees associated with the Steel Dynamics project. This project will be one of many projects that will help shape the future of the Cal Allen's Northwest Boulevard, and it will influence future development projects and public investment in the Northwest Boulevard corridor for years to come. New development like Walker Holdings creates new opportunities for people to live, work, and do business in the Cal Allen area. This proposed development represents the city of Corpus Christi's effort to proactively plan for orderly, attractive, and sustainable growth and development consistent with the community's comprehensive plan. Next slide. This property is located at 3202 Interstate 69. It is roughly 117.29 acres. It was rezoned in 2019 from FR Farm Rule to RS6, Single Family 6 District. The proposed development plans for approximately 400 homes to be built on this site. The first phase, the phase that's highlighted there, Cal Allen South Unit 1, consists of 23.145 platted acres, and it will consist of 73 single-family home sites. It, of course, is located within the city limits, and it is within the Cal Allen Independent School District. Next slide, please. This slide shows approximate location of the planned C1 Street construction for Silverado Drive and for Emory Drive. The developer is required to construct Silverado Drive and Emory Drive to meet the requirements of a C1 collector cross-section, and the city has agreed to participate in the construction costs for the first 632 linear feet for Silverado Drive, which is to the north, and for the first 618 linear feet of Emory Drive, which is to the south. Next slide, please. This slide shows the approximate location of the stormwater drainage channels identified as channels A, B, and C. The developer is required to provide the identified channels in order to alleviate stormwater flooding for the development. The stormwater drainage channels will redirect the flow of stormwater off the site and into the existing master channel located at the southeast corner of the property. As part of the city-led economic development initiative in the Calallen Northwest area, the city has agreed to participate in the construction of the streets and the improvements to the stormwater drainage channels to facilitate completion of this planned subdivision in time to attract employees from the Steel Dynamics plant to live within, of course, the city limits of Corpus Christi. The estimated project cost for the streets and drainage improvements associated with this project is $1,948,535.33. The total cost of the city's participation for streets and drainage improvement is $698,177.56. Associated with this project as well was a wastewater collection line extension, construction, and reimbursement agreement with Walker Holdings and Development LLC to extend the 12-inch wastewater collection line to the subdivision. That reimbursement was $215,393.95, which was approved by council on March 17, 2020. Next slide, please. This slide just shows the development, the residential subdivision, which is Calallen South. They're circled at the bottom to the south, and the Steel Dynamics, which is circled at the top of the page to the north, and all of the amenities between from Calallen Unit South to Steel Dynamics is approximately 20 miles. Next slide, please. And of course, staff recommends approval, and I stand by for any questions. And let me answer the mayor's question. I wanted to answer it by saying two things, Mayor. The UDC is all of the section in the UDC has prohibitive language in it, with the exception of 8.4.1, which is the section that we're talking about now. It gives the city a lot of latitude so that when people come and talk about their issues of participation, because we can't fit that in a box. So people will come and say, hey, you know, I want to do this, I want to do that. We'll look at it. We always have our attorneys with us to make sure we're staying within the confines of the local government code. But in reality, 8.4.5 gives us the flexibility to be able to work with developers so that we can facilitate development. The second thing is you asked, hey, where have we done this before? Just last month, I think it was last month, we took 2 participation agreements to council. One was for MPM development, which was a street participation. It was a street beyond, it was a C3, which is greater than a C1, which the written word of the UEC says. But the difference with that project is that the developer wanted to do streets out of concrete. There's nothing about concrete or materials in the written word of the UDC, so we looked at it and thought this is a great idea because the end result would be a tremendous product for the city that would probably last 10 years with little or no maintenance at all. So that was one, and that was for our participation level was $1.5 million and some change. The next one was for a developer we did. It was for, we did a participation agreement for a water line. The city required a certain size water line to which the developer only had to do 12-inch. The city wanted it to be 16-inch. And I got together with the other directors of certain departments and said, hey, this is something that we should do and not take it from the trust funds and not put it on the back of the developer. And ultimately they agreed with us. And so we ended up doing a $874,000 participation agreement for a water line, which is unique because water lines have basically been usually installed and paid for by the trust fund. So it allows us to think outside of the box, Mayor. It's not like we're giving anything away. We're being very deliberate. We're being very purposeful. But I think we're also facilitating development, and that's what it allows us to do.
Okay, does that complete your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Garza, you've got comment?
I'd like to listen to the developer's comments first, and then
Okay,
I'd like to weigh in.
and the developer is here,
Yes,
Mr. Williams?
he's on, give me just a moment, I'll get him on the phone.
Okay.
Have Lance Walker on the phone with Walker Holdings.
All right. Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
Doing fine.
Good.
You were wanting to make some comments on your agenda item number 21? Excuse me, number 18, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
I didn't really have any added comments. I was just wanted to be available if there was any questions that I could answer.
Well, I don't know that we've got any. The questions, I think, had more to do with the procedure and the perception of, in my opinion, based on the summary that we got from the staff, I mean, they're recommending approval for it, but then they have the caveat there that we're recommending we do this, but by the way, it doesn't meet our rules and regulations. That's what got my attention. And that's what's, I think, the issue here. It has nothing to do with your project, and we appreciate your investment into the community. To me, it was a procedural question, and that's what I'm asking about. I don't know about the rest of the council members, but I think your project's great, and we're glad you're doing it. It was a procedural matter for us, at least for me, and so that was my issue. Mr. Garza, I think, has either question for you or maybe just about the general project.
Yeah, I've got some comments to make, and I guess some questions as to what we want to do going forward. First off, I don't want to be critical about anything that's been done or Mr. Walker's interest in developing that property and providing some homes for some folks that might work over at the Steel Dynamics plant. The concern that I have is that should us as a governing body come up with a policy in a case like this, because there's a lot of vacant land or land yet to be developed between Cal Allen and Tolosa Midway and even Corpus Christi proper. And I'm just wondering, in terms of incentivizing those developments like we're doing with this one, should we not have some sort of a policy that determines how we want to go about? Should we go through a formal RFP process? Should we just have people come in and say, hey, I've got an interest in developing my property? How should we go about a situation like the one we have today? I have some concerns about us just picking a spot out off of Interstate 69 or 77, further than where we've had previous development, and continuing to stretch ourselves out. I had the same concerns when we went out and did some of the things that we did out in London. And my concern is just developing a lot of the spaces and looking for ways to develop spaces that we're already currently servicing in terms of our basic systems, service systems, police and fire, street, and so on. The question here remains, if we wanted to capture some of that growth or some of that labor force living in Corpus Christi, should we go out for an RFP and then take those folks that have an interest and then see where we have existing service systems like a police station or a fire station or a substation where we have road and wastewater and stormwater services already available. So that's the question that I have is, Did Mr. Walker just walk in the door and say he was interested in participating? Or did we actually go out and seek Mr. Walker? And did we give other folks in the building community the same opportunity? That's the only question that I've got.
Okay, Mr. Walker, I can answer that, and then we'll see if you can add to it. This is Peter Zanoni, the city manager. So, Councilman, what we do know is, from talking with Steel Dynamics leadership, the top leadership that are here building the plant, is that at least 50% of the workforce will live in the city of Corpus Christi, and in particular in the Cal Allen area. And then they think the other 50% will live in the Rockport area. But that comes true only if there's housing, right? And so for several months before the pandemic hit, we organized ourselves as a city staff, and we met with every developer. First, we announced it to every housing developer in a Friday morning meeting that Al Raymond has with the development community.
Okay.
And we brought this concept to their attention, the concept being we can sit back as a city and hope for the best, or we can approach housing developers and work with them and encourage them to develop in what we know to be really undesirable development conditions because of drainage and water utility. And so that's, the developers will be the first to tell you, the housing developers, the ones that have developed a lot of Corpus Christi, that the housing development in Cal Allen area is a little more challenging because of stormwater runoff and drainage situations, as well as water. There's several water providers, these municipal water districts, that are out of the city's territory area. So we knew that going into this, and we knew that first, housing developers are going to go where it's easiest to develop, and secondly, we want housing there. So we had several roundtable meetings with every housing developer. Everybody had a chance, and we're working with about 5 of them. Mr. Walker, who's on the phone with us, was one of the first to come to the table and say, I'm ready to go. If you guys help me out with the roads and the drainage, I'll expedite this. And so that's why we're here today. And so our financial participation will help with drainage and road conditions into his development. And the homes will be built soon, and probably in time for some of the first Steel Dynamics employees to live there. Those same employees could have lived in the alternate location of Rockport, and that meant they wouldn't be contributing to our community. We wouldn't get the property tax or sales tax. One other comment on Cal Allen is we know that's an important part of the city, and it oftentimes goes unrecognized or unnoticed. But it does have some significant amenities to include some beautiful parks, access to just about any commercial amenity you're looking for. And more importantly for working and young families is it has 2 great school districts, highly rated, the Cal Allen ISD and the Toloso Midway. So we have that, all those attractions there. We just need one final element, which is the housing. And we have to overcome the impediments to housing, which is the drainage and the higher costs. So by us helping in this way, the staff recommendation to do so, we think that it will expedite the housing and it'll capture a lot of families that wouldn't come here otherwise. That's the background, Councilman.
Okay, and do we have?
Peter, can I add a comment to that?
Yes.
Councilman, just to kind of piggyback on what Peter was saying is that as early as July, Peter came to the Development Services Task Force meeting, and he mentioned, hey, look, I've met with the leadership of Steel Dynamics. He's talking to the Development Task Force group, and he says, hey, look, we want to start housing in Cal Allen, and we'll help in any way we can. Let us know what you can do in those areas. There was not a lot of activity in January, so he came back in February again, and he made the same comment. And then he began to set up meetings. Like he said, all of the developers, some of the home builders that came and we had roundtable sessions with them. But when Mr. Walker came, Mr. Walker and his team, because Mr. Walker came with a home builder, a local home builder, and together we worked out a plan to make the property that I showed you today work. We worked out a plan that included the sewer, which we've gotten from the trust funds, which I mentioned to you. It's already passed and approved. And we worked out a plan to help with the streets that enter the property and help with the drainage. Collectively, we worked that out. And once we kind of shook hands and said, yes, we're moving forward with this, We then put the plan together to bring the reimbursement to council and ultimately now this participation agreement before you. So everyone had an opportunity, and we would, obviously the more who jump into it, the more it can participate. But Councilman, this kind of challenge was thrown out to the entire development community, and only Mr. Walker and his team collectively came and said, hey, can you really help me? Because it was basically shovel ready. So until this email came on Sunday by Carl Krull, I was really surprised. I didn't think there was a problem because I thought we had worked out everything and we're moving forward with progress, facilitating development that needed to happen. So.
Okay, you've answered most of my questions. The only other question I've got is in terms of fire and police protection. Do we have adequate fire, a fire station close by that can provide the proper service or the proper protection, or are we going to need to build a new fire station?
No, we have, there's actually two fire districts, if you will, the city, Corpus Christi, and then there's the Annabelle fire district as well. So there's ample coverage, police protection, there's ample coverage for that. The development is happening in Cal Island, and I understand your position. I'm a big advocate for inner city development because the infrastructure is already in, right? Mm-hmm. But people live where there's good school districts, and a commute of 15 minutes is desirable. If you add another 15 or another 30, that 45-minute commute from the inner city up to Cal Island is probably, it may not happen. We as a city need to provide those basic services. The development will come over time, as it has been, but this helps us to get the housing now before we lose families and they buy homes outside of Nueces County, and we lose that tax revenue, we lose that intellect, and we lose the community that can develop up there in a great way.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm done, Mayor.
All right, any other comments?
Yeah, Mayor, I have a question.
All right.
Yeah, and this is for City Manager and Al Raymond. When you were discussing this, did you include the discussion of a public improvement district option for funding for this project when you were talking to the developer?
Yes, we did, Councilman. We talked about PIDs, we talked about TERSs, we put several of the options on the table to consider.
Well, considering the situation with the trust fund, the whole idea was to make sure we had another tool in the toolbox to be able to fund some of these projects. A PID would probably be a good solution here to cover some of the costs for the infrastructure, and you can spread that out over time. Our planning department, at my request, spent a lot of time and effort to develop this policy in place, and we have it in place to be able to facilitate that for our development community. I think if this is an option to do it the right way and not circumvent the UDC, this is probably the best option. And is there a reason why that wasn't chosen?
Yeah, the PID, Councilman, as you recall from the policy that we developed under your leadership, is that it would place an additional assessment on the home. This property is in the city limits of Corpus Christi, and so those PIDs typically work best outside city limits because the incremental assessment that's added is generally the same amount of property tax of the tax rate of the city.
Peter, they're already paying extra for an extra fire department out there with the emergency service district.
Well,
they're paying for our fire department as well as others.
Yeah, that's all the more reason not to put another PID on top of they would pay this Nueces County and Corpus Christi property tax, plus another assessment. And that just doesn't make, it would make it financially challenging for home ownership. That's why people tend to move outside the city limits. Those PIDs are a good tool, as we mentioned, but this property is already in the city limits, so.
Well, a PID is a tool, and it's not exclusively for outside the city limits. You can use it in the city limits.
You can, right, but it would be
I understand the situation, but I tend to agree with the mayor on this, that it is not a good precedent to circumvent policies we have in place. We need to play by the rules, and this is kind of what we're looking at. And I understand where the example Mr. Raymond gave with the London area where the utility department wanted a larger size, and they came to the table with that need. But that was already going to be built. So I don't think that's kind of apples and oranges. I just think, you know, if we're going to be doing this, we need to do it the right way.
Yeah, Councilman, just to clarify, and Al can probably help. So there's two different things at issue here. One is the UDC waiver adjustment, I guess. And then the second thing is how the infrastructure is funded. They're not really connected. So, Al, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Well, yeah, thanks, Peter, because so that we can get apples to apples, the concrete road that was done by the developer in one of our last participation agreements, to fund that at the rate we did was also an exception to the UDC. It wasn't like we ignored it or ignored what the written word said. It just made perfectly good sense for the citizens, for our community, and that's really how we look at 8.4.1. It's not a prohibition. The UDC doesn't put a prohibition in 8.4.1. It just gives latitude for reasonable people to sit down and discuss, hey, what is your challenge and how can we help you? How can we participate in you overcoming that challenge? And that's really kind of how it's always worked.
When you're referring to that on the concrete streets for that development, you're referring to the stormwater waiver that was changed regarding concrete piping for the sewer lines. I mean, for the stormwater.
Right. No, I know that we did that, but I'm just referring to the construction of the roadway, of the infrastructure.
Okay, well, I tend to like that particular waivers. I mean, I think HDPE piping would be much better over time, since it is a lot cheaper. And if we can do that with concrete streets and save on the cost for installing the concrete piping, that's a good thing. And as a matter of fact, we should probably look at that as a policy going forward. But in terms of this, in terms of funding, I mean, if you're asking us to pay for the funding for the infrastructure where we require it be done differently other places. Now, I know you're in the process of doing this impact fee process, but I mean, what do we do in the meantime? Is this the solution?
Oh, and let me say one other thing, Councilman and Mayor and others. January of this year, when we were in kind of, I guess, in the throngs of doing our every second Friday, our development task force meeting, Budget came to me and said, hey, look, Development Services, there's almost $5 million in this participation bucket that dated back until 2012. And of course I go, well, what is it for? And then he says, hey, look at this. And when I read oh wow, here we can use this money to help facilitate development. I went to again at the Development Services Task Force meeting in January, in February, and in March. Of course, by that time we were all kind of out of the office then. But I mentioned to the group, you know, I put it out to the group, hey, look, we have almost $5 million in the bucket for city participation with streets and drainage. So if you have challenges, you know, let us know. You know, there are some requirements that you have to live by, but bring challenges and we'll see if we can kind of connect the dots in the middle. So I want to make sure that, especially with you, Councilman Hernandez, it's not like we did something kind of clandestine in the dark. It's been put forward to the development community, and quite frankly, even if this deal gets approved, there's still $2.4 million in that bucket, because rarely do people come and say, I should say rarely do developers come and say, look, I have a challenge. Can you help me meet this in the middle? So it's a way for us, the Development Services, to help facilitate development, which is why I think 8.4.1 doesn't lock us into kind of the prohibitive language of you shall and you shall not. And really that's how we interpret it and implement it, if you will.
Okay, thank you for that. I still have a lot of questions associated with it. This is probably something that probably should have come to us individually in order to explain it, especially if you're going outside the norm. Just my advice for the future.
I don't see any lights lit up. Anybody out in the hinterland want to ask a
I've got-
question?
Greg Smith. So a couple of questions from Mr. Walker that on there, $699,000 for 60 lots. That's a lot of money for not many lots. So the question one is what is the total plan for this? And then the other, you have the 3 drainage channels. Will they stay and be under city maintenance, or will they eventually, as the future units build out, will that be underground piping?
Okay,
So
well,
to the developer, what's the total plan? What do you envision for that acreage on there? And then the drainage channels, are they temporary or permanent?
well, the drainage channels are going to be temporary, and the roads for the rest of this development will be on top of those ditches. So we need those to drain the first phase, as we do need the 2 roads coming in for the first phase. Eventually, we'll build this one right after the other as fast as possible. So, those ditches will, although they'll be temporary now, they'll have pipe in them, and the streets will be on top of them in the future. The incoming roads, they'll be used for the whole development. In the end, the city will have 400 lots in there that will, they'll have to, the city, by making let's say, $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 investment, will get that back in a matter of years once all the lots are built.
And can you explain the development to us? Is it $150,000 houses, 200? What are your amenities since the city is participating and may be participating?
200 to 280,000 in that range.
Okay. And do you have any other amenities or something to encourage somebody to go to Cal Island rather than Rockport?
Well, our school system is very strong, and that's probably the best encouragement we're going to have out there. We do have a lot of amenities such as Walmart very close, all the shopping. And I think it all just boils down to, sort of getting out of the traffic in town and, just having housing. In Cal Island right now, if you wanted to buy a lot to build a house, they're non-existent. There's not, if somebody wanted to move to Cal Island and build, well, they can't do it. So the only way to get them to come there is build it. And the reason this got to this point was the construction cost has gone so haywire. Your material at $30 a ton for base material, and it's gotten so out of hand. It wouldn't make it profitable for us to do it on our own unless we had some help, because it's not feasible without the help.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else out in the cloud? Ms. Guajardo?
Thank you. So did anybody mention the tax base, what this would generate
The tax, I
roughly? Well, I guess he said, 400 lots?
don't know if we have that, do you have that, Steve?
I mean, that's
400 lots at 500 apiece, be $2 million a year.
$2 million a year. And your timeline, Mr. Walker, roughly would be how many?
4 to 5 years.
4 to 5 years of property that would not otherwise be developed.
That's correct.
Well,
Or it'd be turned into commercial, one of the two.
right. I guess a couple of things. I mean, I understand the point. I think Rudy has a good point. I think probably, if there's this type need in certain areas of town, all policy makes sense. I think going into these conversations that were had, that I happened to be at 2 of those meetings when this was all brought up. And I didn't hear one developer complain about it. As a matter of fact, it was an exciting thing, as Peter mentioned. I was also a little bit surprised, but I understand this, it says the UDC, it doesn't conform with the UDC. But Mr. Raymond, you've addressed that as well. I thought this was also a very positive thing at those meetings. And again, I attended 2 of those upstairs on the 6th floor. And I don't know how it all came about, after those meetings, but I know there were several people in that room that were very interested who have property in Calallen. So it's kind of disappointing that we're kind of teeter-tottering. I understand the point, but we're looking at a 45-year timeline and $2 million, you said, a year.
That'd be total ad valorem, Paul. That'd be about $600,000 for the city. $100 million valuation, 400 houses at $250.
So what would it be? I can't hear you.
For the city, it'd be about $600,000.
Yeah, the 2 million is probably the school districts and the county, so
That's all. Yeah.
in 1 year, basically, we'll make back the money that we're helping to invest. But that doesn't include things like sales tax, other investment in
Right.
Calallen. I mean, the developers were the first, as Al said, nobody raised their hand. Why? Because it's a little more expensive to build up here. The homes that were built already up there with the low fruit, so to speak, because that's where the drainage systems were. Everything else to be developed, like Mr. Walker's property, is going to take more infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that we shouldn't develop. That's a great location. There's a lot of amenities. There's Walmart, Home Depot, 2 great school districts. There's medical facilities and 2 great parks, both regional in nature, the West Guth Park and the Hazel Baysmore Park, which are great for families. So this community, Calallen, and too bad Councilman Roy had to recuse himself, but it's a great part of Corpus Christi, and we want it developed in a good way. One thing you can't really tell is that the layout of this subdivision is really how we should be doing it in Corpus Christi. It's well laid out. There's a lot of cul-de-sacs. It's not just straight lines of row and row of row after homes. So the developer has put some thought into it. They're all brick homes. It's going to have great curb appeal, and it's going to have a great legacy or length to the subdivision. It's really an attractive subdivision. And Al Raymond spoke better than I about it when we first saw it. He's the architect. But that's one thing you can't really tell, but we did want to commend the developer for sticking with the layout that he had with more cul-de-sacs, less straight roads, which end up being speed traps that we have to fix later with speed humps and such.
If I may add one more.
Oh, go ahead.
Now, if I may add one more thing, the city is we're gonna have the 2 C1 collector streets that's gonna tie back into Emory, and we're also gonna loop the water line back to Emory, so that should help with the city's boil water situations. That's probably why they come up with that problem at the end of that dead end line there, the 12-inch line.
Yeah, and then one other thing, if I can, I'm sorry, and this will be my last comment, I think, but HEB, we failed to mention them. They put a significant investment in their store in Annabelle, I think several $1 million, in anticipation of the Steel Dynamics plant and more people as well. And we talked to them as well as the housing developers, because they have some additional property on Northwest Boulevard where a future HEB could be built. And so they said there's going to be a rooftop trigger. Once there's a certain number of homes, they'll build a second HEB there on Northwest Boulevard. And that's real important to the community that lives there, not further down in the Annabelle area. Just another point.
Anybody, any other comment?
I have one
Mr.
more.
Garza, is that?
Yeah, I have one more question, follow-up
Yes, sir.
question. Just to be, first off, Mr. Raymond, I appreciate your approach to encouraging development and being open to challenges that some of the developers or home builders might have in doing projects. So again, I don't have any concerns there. The process that you took in offering potential help should some of the developers or builders need some in order to encourage development in the Cal Island area, I think has got me satisfied from that regard. The last thing is that just the amount of investment for 50 homes, which is the first phase, is there going to be a follow-up ask to get to the 400 home level, or is this it?
You want to take that? To me, it's going to be a one-time investment for the city. From there,
Okay.
we're going to take it. The further development is going to cost about $12 million in the end. So, you know, if you look at numbers, cost of the property and $12 million to finish out the 400 lots is our cost.
Okay.
And the city's $1 million, which is going to get back in the first year once they're all built.
Okay, that was the last question I had, is just the $700-something thousand is going to get us the lots that you need to be able to build 400 homes, correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. That's good.
Good question, Councilman.
All right, just one other thing, and I want to clarify again to Mr. Walker and the other. I'm not questioning, and I appreciate the development. My questioning is the rules that we're playing by. And, you know, the explanation for the development is that you can't find a house out in Cal Island. The demand is so great, you know, build them and they will come. The development game is you invest your money and you get your money back when you sell the lots.
Correct.
So if you're putting in this kind of investment, you're going to get your money back. So another $600,000 over the $12 million that's pocket change. The other thing is, which is that's the name of the game, is you make your investment, you get your money back. I have no problem with that. I think that's good. Has HEB asked for supplemental support if they go put a new store in? I don't know that HEB's come and asked for any financial aid if they're going to put a new store in. I mean, they do it their own. They see the value of investing in an area. The question I've got with the policy, and maybe this is something, Mr. Raymond, you and your staff are doing. I'm not aware of all these meetings that Ms. Wahardo's going to when you're discussing all these development projects, but I don't know that we're involved in them. But when you bring a policy to us, the purpose of these expenses is you're respectively asking for oversizing the improvements. Well, I think if we're doing our planning properly, we ought to put the requirements in, as a person says, what has got to go out here to service this area. And if it takes a 14-inch or an 18, what's the standard you're talking about, going from what size to what size? If our standard rule is 12 inches of pipe and you're wanting them to go to 16 or 18, I mean, I would think our master planning and the people that do that would say in this area we need a 18 or a 24 inches instead of a 12, and they know it when they walk through the front door. I like your hat there, Mr. Zanoni. Are you trying to distract my train of thought over here while I'm waxing not so eloquently? But make it part of the rule and not an exception to the rule, because I'm getting back the biggest detriment and discouragement to people is that we're having to pick winners and losers, and people aren't playing by the same rules. So that's my question. I don't have a problem with Mr. Walker's project. I'm not a betting man, but I'd be almost willing to bet you that whether he gets this subsidy or this reimbursement, this project's going to move forward whether we approve it or not and meet the requirements that we're putting on them. For $600,000, a $12 or $50 million project's not going to be derailed. But, I mean, everybody, and if I were in his shoes, I'd be asking for every bit of help I could get too. That's just the name of the game. So it's the consistency that I'm questioning, that everybody ought to play by the same rules. And rather than, if we're saying they got to be oversized, why don't we put the proper size in when a developer comes in and says, okay, out here, this is what's required. whatever it is, 12, 16, 8, I'm not in the development business. Rudy, you're in the development business, or you're related to it, or you know a lot about it. You know a lot more about it than I do. I mean, I guess in different areas of town, you got different sized pipes that you're requiring. I don't know. But we know Cal Island's been there since the book of Genesis, so we've known whatever drainage problems they've got. So if it requires on Alameda, if it requires a 12-inch drain or water line, and over here, needs an 18, that ought to be what's specified when a developer comes in and says, okay, I want to put my money in here, rather than say, well, we want you to oversize it. Well, those are the kind of things I'm talking about. And maybe that's part of the process of review that you're doing. But anyway, those are just my frustrations. It has nothing to do with the developer and what he's trying to do and trying to accomplish. But I do think that we've got to get consistent with people if we can expect, encouraging people to come in rather than always an exception rather than the rule.
Mayor, can I add just a few comments to what you're saying? Al Raymond, Development Services again.
Sure.
This is what I'll say. You're making excellent observations, and that's exactly why we started sometime late last year talking about impact fees, because without impact fees, the only way the city can address those major issues like drainage or sewer or whatever, we've used the trust funds, which in my opinion, is just my opinion, everyone don't get upset. It's just not adequate for a city this size, right? But with impact fees, what you're saying will actually happen, right? Someone said they'll know exactly what's the upsizing. And in theory, the upsizing is not going to be on the developer. It's going to be on the city, because we're going to put in the infrastructure through impact fees to help facilitate development. So that's one thing I'm going to say. In regard to the UDC, I'll say this. We have money to, in essence, give away to help facilitate development, right? All I can do from a development service standpoint is just speak to the development community, my constituents, and say, hey, we've got money. Do you have challenges? Let's see if we can kind of meet in the middle and let me help you get there, so to speak. Because it's that kind of relationship, it's not going to fall into the written word of the UDC, the black and white, because everyone's issue is going to be different. What we should focus on is that it does comply with the Texas Local Government Code. It's not out of the realm of what the state says we can do. We keep it under 30%. We try to make sure it's a viable need, and it's for the benefit of the entire community and not just a few individuals. So when you look at this and it said it kind of in Carl's email and other emails that, hey, this is only helping one developer. That's not true. Someone's got to dig the ditches. That's one contract. Someone's got to build the streets. That's one contract. Someone's got to build the homes. That's another contract. So it's putting a lot of people to work, and it's really helping the community overall. So we try, we're, as Peter said, we are in the process of updating and amending the UDC, and this is one of the sections that will certainly get some close scrutiny. But we try to facilitate and implement consistently, but understand that everyone's problem that comes belly up to the bar is not the same. So we try to be a reasonable people in accommodating or trying to accommodate needs, and that requires a little flexibility that will not always meet with the letter of the law, so to speak.
If I'll also add, the UC doesn't prohibit this agreement. It's just not geared towards. It doesn't. There's no recommended. It doesn't recommend towards this type of agreement.
Can you repeat that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you.
So the UDC doesn't prohibit funding of residential collectors. It has a presumption that the developer will build them, but it doesn't prohibit it.
It has the presumption that the developer will build the utilities?
The residential collector streets.
Well, I would think so. He's a developer. He's supposed to build the resident. How do you get to his houses if the developer doesn't build the streets? I mean, that's you can't go out in the middle of a cornfield and build a house. You got to build the streets. That's a developer's responsibility. I mean, it doesn't take a mental giant to figure out that's a developer's responsibility. Or what am I missing?
Mr. Mayor, this is Mike Johnson at Development Services.
Hopefully I can talk to some of your concerns and some of the council members' concerns on this. So the developer is supposed to build the street, but all they're really required to build is a residential street, surface street, which is 20 feet. So a C1 is larger, and the UDC calls for developers to build up to what's called the C1, or slightly larger, or 40-foot wide street between the curbs with all the appendages that go with that. And that's kind of that guidance there. And how we approach this agreement, because of the way the UDC is written, says it doesn't say shall, it says may, which is kind of a term that gives us a little bit of latitude after talking with council and looking at Texas Local Government Code 212, which provides guidance on city participation with developers for certain type of improvements. So that's really the governing section or law for this section of the UDC. And as we approach this agreement with the streets, oversizing, can we participate? And it says we may or may not. And then with the drainage cross sections, the reason for the drainage is if you build for only unit 1, what will happen is that the rest of the units can't have the waterfall. It'll oversurge capacity and the flooding will continue. So we're requesting that the oversizing of the drainage to meet the future build out. So that's allowable under the Texas Local Government Code 212, which governs city participation, which gives us the equation for this. So this is kind of talks to what Mr. Raymond was talking about. Is it gives us some latitude. This section is not as hard as fast, let's say, as the trust fund or the platting rules, which still have a way to get it released to a applicant. So in this case, looking at it, what's trying to do, trying to meet the goal, the vision of the city to attract these new homeowners, potentially, keeping in line with the law of the state of Texas, what the attorney helped us make sure we were doing, and facilitating this and keeping this fair to everyone. Just for a bit of fact, the last 3 participation agreements we brought to council, each one of those 3 were not strictly in accordance with the UDC, but they were also in accordance with the Texas Local Government Code, meaning the department, through agreement back and forth with the developer, making sure we were legal and not presenting something outside the law, was good as we brought forward to help spur development, whether it be the linear parking for Bill Witt and across from the states with the extension of Bill Witt Drive, the streets participation agreement with Kings Landing we just took in for $1.5 million, and then the grid main line extension, which benefited the city and the local residents out there. So it's not a cookie cutter, but we're, it's fostering a good relationship and presenting you all with good information for making decisions.
All right, so basically what I just heard you say is that we focus on being in compliance with the state regulations and that the UDC is just guidelines. It has no enforcement. We don't really care whether we make exceptions or don't. Our concern is being in compliance with the state law, right? So our UDC is just say, this is our wish list, you build it like this, but if it's in compliance with the state, you pretty much can do what you want to do, which is fine with me. That just strengthens my argument we ought to do away with the UDC.
I guess the agreement's outside of the framework of the UDC, but it's not prohibited by the UDC.
So, but if state law is what you're trying to stay in compliance with, why are you wasting all the time and energy with the UDC?
Can't respond.
Silence is deafening.
No comment, Mayor.
Mayor, can I move for
I rest
approval?
my case. All right, anybody got a motion on,
This is Roland. I move for approval.
there's a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a second. Any further discussion? Well, I stated I wasn't going to support it up front. I'm going to support it at this point.
Mayor?
Not because I'm
One
in.
last question.
Who is this?
This is Councilman Hernandez. One last
Okay.
question.
Go ahead.
The funding is coming out of the 2016 bond. I'm assuming these are some leftover funds from a project. Is that, I just want to make sure that's correct. This is not coming out of anybody's budget.
Yeah, that's correct. It's not-
Councilman,
yeah. Well, go ahead, Val. It's not
Councilman-
leftover money.
yeah, Councilman, it's coming from, there's, in the bonds that are put out to the voters, there's a section that puts money into a pot for city participation. So it's not coming out of anything else other than out of this pot for city or developer participation. It's from the 2012, 2016, 2018.
Okay. I just want to make sure that this wasn't dedicated to something else that we could have done something else with, and that's fine. Thank you.
All right, there's a motion and a second that we approve this, and like I said, I wasn't going to at first, but I don't agree with it. We've romanced this developer down the road this far under a flawed interpretation, in my opinion. So there's a motion and a second. Any other comment? Ms. Worth, you want to call the roll?
Yes, sir. For passage of Resolution 18, Mayor McComb? Council members Guajardo?
Aye.
Hernandez?
Aye.
Hunter?
Aye.
Molina?
Aye.
Roy abstains. Smith?
Aye.
Barrera?
Aye.
And Garza.
Aye.
The resolution passes.
Quick question. Mr. Raymond, what are the meetings called that you held upstairs in the or used to hold on the sixth floor?
We're getting started next month. It'll, of course, be virtual, but we're trying to start it up virtually.
But what do
again,
you call them? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's the Development Services Task Force meeting.
Right.
The second Friday of every month.
Okay, and I just want to make sure the council knows those actually go out as a news release. And so I
Yes,
jumped
ma'am.
into some of those meetings just to kind of stay in the know and see what's going on. But I think we're all welcome.
Thank you.
All right, quickly, we've got, let me get back over here to my, if we could, we're kind of past the lunch area thing, but I think Mike Culbertson, is he still here back somewhere?
I know Ian was on the phone.
Ian or Mike, are either one of you still here?
He's coming out.
Okay.
Oh, good. He's
If you
there.
could, council, I'd like to move item number 21 up before we take our lunch break, because Mr. Culbertson's been here, and I meant to try to ease him in a little earlier today, but he's been there long enough to grow a beard, my goodness.
Oh, there you go. All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Mike Culbertson with your Corpus Christi Regional EDC here with good news.
And this is item 21, and I think, Ms. Huerta, did you say you had other public comment or people wanted to make comments?
No, sir, it was just Ms.
Just
Hicks
the
who
one?
spoke earlier.
Okay, and that was Ms. Hicks that made the phone call. Okay. Item 21, go ahead.
All right. I'm Mike Culbertson. I have the Executive Director of the Botanical Gardens, Michael Womack, with me to answer any questions. This is a good news item. You know, the Botanical Garden is a feature in our community, you know, that makes it one of those quality of life.
You turn your mic on, Mayor?
Call the meeting back to order following the loss of power here at the City Hall. I don't know what happened, but we're glad to have the power back. We took advantage of that and just took the lunch break, so we won't be going to a lunch break following any more discussion, so we're here till we get through. We're gonna go to item 21, Mike Culbertson from the EDC. This is an issue relating to the Botanical Garden.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mike Culbertson with the EDC. I have with me the Executive Director of the Botanical Gardens, Michael Womack, to answer any questions. Botanical Gardens, is one of those great quality of life features that are in the community. It's big for tourists, it's big for locals. There's a lot of events that can take place there. But if you remember the last time you were there, when you go down Oso Creek Ridge, the path is really just a mowed path, and down there it has mulch on it. What they've asked for is they've come to us with, come to the Type B. Remember, we can do a little bit more in Type B than Type A. Come to the Type B board and ask for a grant of $89,000. And what this would do, it would improve that 3,000 feet of trail with caliche and granite. This would also make it, make all of that space out there accessible to people with, mobility problems or limited mobility. Plus, it would have the ability for emergency vehicles, if there was a problem out on there, to get that through. The grant will also be used for a matching grant, which they've been preliminary approved of for $198,000 from Texas Parks and Wildlife. And this would extend the path even further, another 1,100 feet, but it would also add things throughout the park and the trail, such as garbage cans, benches, and things like that. Just so you know, when it goes through the Type B, it goes to the EDC first, and the EDC board listened to this. They recommended approval to the Type B board, and unanimous. The Type B looked at this, and they again approved it, recommendation unanimously. So it's now to council. We stand by to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions on this? It sounds like a good project to me.
It's a great project, sir.
Great.
It's a big
Move to
win.
approve.
Second.
All right, there's a motion second to approve. Any discussion on item 21? I think the only question we might have is, are you ready to get started, or is this something coming later in the year, or when?
We are ready to at least get started on, there's one little area we have to redirect the pathway to level it out. And so we'll start that in August. But what we have to do is we then need to wait for sometime between September, I was told sometime between September and April, we should get the final approval from Texas Parks and Wildlife. There's a process through the U.S. Highway Department to make sure that the plan follows their guidelines, particularly for wetland areas. They're looking at mitigation in terms of wetlands or endangered species. It's an existing pathway. We don't see a problem with that, and we have a relationship with the local people that would be U.S. Fish and Wildlife that would be looking at those things. So as soon as we get their final approval, we can get it done, and it should only take a couple of months because it'll be contracted out. So as soon as we get that approval, we'll go full force, but in the meantime, we'll just get the redirection done to get started on it and meet the opening requirements of the contract with the EDC.
All right, thank you. Anybody have any other comments? We've had a motion and a second on item 21, correct? Yes, sir. Seeing no other, other than Ms. Hicks calling in, no other public comment related to this item?
No, sir, that's correct.
All right, would you like to call the roll, please, on item 21?
For passage of ordinance 21 on its first reading, Mayor McComb.
Aye.
Council members Guajardo.
Aye.
Hernandez. Mr. Hernandez?
I can hear him.
Okay, I think your mic's off. Hunter?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Hunter?
Aye.
Molina?
Aye.
Roy?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Barrera?
Aye.
And Garza.
Aye.
The ordinance passes.
All right, then we need to go back to item 19. Is that correct? Well, let's do 20 first before we go back to the meeting, the corporation there. Item number 20 is an ordinance to change the name of William Street to Lomax Street located in Council District 1. We have the backup material, I think. Oh, there's a public hearing. So is there a presentation on this? We just go into public hearing.
Mr. Martinez has a presentation.
All right, the street man.
How are you, sir?
All right. Keep laying that pavement.
If we could pull up item 20, please. I don't know if they can hear me in the back.
Item 20 back there in the control room. I'm jumping around on you. Sorry about that.
Is no 20
No,
loaded?
it's not loaded.
Okay. All right, so then I will see if we can put it up here on the screen. Really quick. Okay, so Mayor, Council, City Manager, today I'm here to present a request that was put in place to rename William Street from Lower Broadway to North Shoreline Boulevard. The requester came early last year in 2019 and brought it to the City Secretary's attention, wanting to go ahead and rename that. It did not meet the code, so it is section number 7 in the city policy of code, based on the 1852 criteria that was set in place for street names throughout the city, which this street, William, was part of the original first part of the city of Corpus Christi. So with that, it was brought to this body. This body requested that we go ahead and move forward with the application process, and that happened in January of this past year. So with that, our traffic engineer then started going through the process. So she went and surveyed all the property owners that actually would be affected by the street name change. And so the only 3 property owners that would be affected by that was actually the requester. So we have a 75% ratio requirement, and so it met it. It met 100% ratio requirement. So with that, what that required us to do is go and survey a lot of different organizations and agencies, internal departments as well. And so with that, we got only one objection from that, and it came from the Landmark Commission. So the Landmark Commission basically, and I can read the letter into, I'm going to go ahead and read the letter into the ordinance so that we could make sure that we have that in. So this was addressed to Ms. Couture. The Landmark Commission held a regularly scheduled meeting on May 28th and discussed the renaming of William Street. During this meeting, we discussed the historical nature of the street within the context of the original plan of Corpus Christi from 1852. The request to change the street name to Lomax and concerns with existing name conflicts with other streets in the city. After discussion, the commission voted to unanimously oppose the renaming of William Street to Lomax Street. We would like to highlight the historical nature of this street name and its presence on the first official maps of the newly formed city of Corpus Christi, named by the founder of the city 168 years ago. We would also like to highlight the fact that previous city councils voted to preserve the original 1852 street names through City Council Policy Number 7B. The City Council policy includes declining the name any street, number 2, for a person not deceased, and number 4, that is reflected in the 1852 plan of Corpus Christi, or a street named that has existed within the original boundary of the 1852 plan of Corpus Christi for a period of greater than 50 years. The commissioners greatly appreciate Mr. Lomax and his family's efforts in developing businesses and properties downtown, promoting other development in the area, and generally being an outstanding advocate for downtown. Being it is such a historical location, near and dear to the commissioners' collective hearts. Additionally, the commissioners support and understand the importance of the aforementioned city policies, which are in line with the best practices in the city's planning and protection of the history and heritage of Corpus Christi. We appreciate the city staff and council's willingness to involve the Landmark Commission in this process and look forward to further communication or considerations as needed. So with that, we had only one opposition into that area, and so we're bringing it back forward to you for review. We've actually met with the requester and told her what the cost would be to change all the signs, and she has agreed to pay for those costs of replacing all the street signs. I stand to take any questions.
All right, any questions on the request? It would simply be a motion to approve, right? And then that would trigger the process of getting the name plates made and changed out.
Yes, sir.
And there was, other than Ms. Hicks, no public comment?
No, on this one, they're actually, for the public hearing, Ms. Bakay, the chair of the Landmark Commission, submitted a letter,
And
but
that was
Mr.
it?
Martinez just read it into the record, so
Okay.
I don't need to read it again, but she did submit that public comment as
Okay.
well.
So, for the record, public comment was submitted in writing as well as a comment over the telephone by Ms. Hicks.
Well, no, she submitted the same letter that he read also through our public comment process by email, so she submitted a written public comment.
Ms. Hicks?
Ms. Bakay.
Okay,
So
that's
Jillian
but
Bakay.
what I'm saying for the record, there were two public comment submissions, one verbal by Ms. Hicks and one by the Landmark.
Ms. Hicks was actually commenting on the botanical gardens. So this is
Oh, okay.
on the street
All
renaming,
right.
Mayor.
All right,
Yeah,
I
so-
got her name written here on the wrong, okay, I see, I got it
Yes, sir.
there. Okay. I'll entertain a motion then for approval of item 20.
I'm sorry.
I mean, no, we're in the public hearing, right?
Yes, so,
Excuse me, you have a comment, Ms. Wilhurlo?
I do, but are we in public hearing then?
so did you open the public
Open
hearing?
the public hearing on item 20. I thought I did.
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay,
Or
I
if-
just want to make
If
sure.
I didn't, I did. Do you want to repeat what you said, or do we hear it?
No.
Okay, you don't have to repeat it. Thank you,
No,
sir.
he doesn't.
All right, but
No,
it's-
so I just, quick question, and just for clarity, because we are going against our policy, and I'm supportive of the item, but the reasoning, the street does go back to the plan from 1852,
1852. Yes, ma'am.
but it was the, I guess, the issues, right, with the spelling of the two different ones that are so close together.
Yeah, there's another street that's close by
Right.
to that, yes.
Right, okay, just wanted to.
Yeah, there's a William and a Williams,
Right.
and Williams is out, runs parallel to Padre Island Drive between PID and Holly.
Right.
And if you're in the delivery business, there's confusion of you're delivering something to William, then you come down here, and then they say, no, that's out on PID, or no, you want the one downtown. And the owners are the ones that initiated the change because of the confusion. And they
Yeah.
happened to be in a business that they had a lot of deliveries coming to them. They were in the furniture business, and the old what's now where Texas A&M is.
Mm-hmm.
That was the original location, I think, and they're still there. But no, I think they donated that money, donated that building to the university, or they sold it to the university. So
Right.
I think some clarification, they put up with the name confusion for a number of years.
Yeah, no, and
So-
I'm supportive,
Okay,
but we are going against
all right.
policy.
Mr. Molina,
Thank you, Mayor. I know other cities have gone forward with ceremonial street name changes where a plaque for the street name, let me go back. So other cities have ceremonial street names. And in those cases, the original street name is preserved, but there is a ceremonial street name placard placed above the original existing street name sign, which is dedicated to the honoree. Has that been considered or discussed here? I think that would be a good way to still preserve our history, but also still, I believe the intent here is to honor the Lomax family, and I think that would be a good way to take care of both of the issues.
It had not been considered here, sir.
Okay.
But it could be, sir.
There could be, Councilman, if you wanted us to look into that. It would be financially probably a small amount, right?
Very small amount.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's doable. We just have to see where to place a sign, frankly, so it's not in conflict with the driver.
Yeah, and these are this type of thing has been done in other cities before.
Oh, yeah, we did it in San Antonio a lot, and we probably have it here. We probably have one or two here, I bet.
We would just have to make sure that it didn't confuse, as Mr. Zanoni said, confuse the driver where the location was at.
Yeah. So I would like to look further into that.
We could.
Because I think that would be a good way to have our cake and eat it too in this.
Yes, sir.
In this instance. Thank you.
Well, explain how that works, because if it remains, the purpose of the request, well, it had a twofold purpose. One is to eliminate the confusion. So if you're going to continue to call it William Street,
That would be the concern, to make sure that we
it's
didn't
still William
have that
Street. No,
confliction.
by the way, it's Lomax Street. So then you're adding confusion.
Yes, sir. It would have some, if the placards were conflicting with each other, yes, we'd have that. But again, we would look at a location where we could put the placard so that it didn't have that confusion.
Well,
Yeah, we'd have to come up with a
the
creative
placard
idea.
doesn't address, if I'm a business on William or Williams, if it's
No, it
still the
doesn't do
legal
that.
name of the street,
Yes.
the placard doesn't address that. And that was the original purpose of the requested change.
That is correct, sir.
And then I think as they were looking for what else name could we do it, this Lomax concept came up. But it really was initiated because of the confusion of the mail and physical deliveries to the location. So a placard's not going to solve that problem,
You'd still have that issue, yes, sir.
whether you named it Wahardo Street or Macomb Street or anything else, in honor of, whatever. But if your mail is still going to William or Williams,
It wouldn't, yeah.
it would not change that confusion.
The street would have a name change. It would be changed to Lomax Street. That would be the street name going forward. There'd be like an honorary sign saying, former William Street or William Street designation or something. We'd have to come up with some type of wording.
I mean, if you change the name of the street
Yeah.
for legal purposes,
Yes.
and then you had a plaque, formerly Williams name
Yeah.
in the origination.
Yeah, I think my intent is just to make sure that we preserve the history there also.
Yeah.
Yeah, originally named William Street
Yeah, it'd
after
be
the
like-
founder and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, blah, and three
Be
bags
like a
full.
placard of sorts.
I don't have a problem with that, but.
Yeah, but the legal name change, it would be a legal name change, but to Lomax Street. So
Okay.
mail, Google Maps, all that would be legally changed to Lomax.
Okay, well,
But there'd be
that
a-
meets the purpose of the confusion. And then the recognition that originally named in the original charter was William, but now it's Lomax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I
a good
don't have-
idea.
That would meet both targets, I think. I don't have a problem with that.
We could come up with something, sir. for that.
Yeah. If you add that to the motion today, when we come back for the second read, we could bring back at that time what the designation would say.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
can show
would
you.
the street signs would still be the responsibility of the applicant?
Yes.
Right.
The historical reminders or the designation signs would be the cost of the city?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other, Mr. Molina, are you finished?
I'm finished unless you need some amendment language.
Well, we need $100 out so you can help pay for the sign.
I'd like to ask a question, Mayor.
Mr. Roy?
This is Michael.
Oh, excuse me, Michael, go ahead.
Did I misunderstand you when you said that the current street name is named after a founder of the city of Corpus Christi?
No, the founder of the city of Corpus Christi actually developed the names for city of Corpus Christi in 1852.
Okay, but he is not the founder. This is not named after a founder, this street name.
No, from my understanding, it is not named
Okay.
after the founder.
Thank you. All right, I'm good to go.
All right.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
Not a comment. I did notice the Nueces County Historical Society supported the change, and I think the talk is a good deal, putting both of them. But the name William, one of Henry Kenny's partners was William Mann. And then there was another William Aubrey. And I talked to Jim Maloney, and they do not know where William originated from. They think it may be William Mann, and we have a Mann Street. So unlike a lot of the other names that have historic significance, even though, to Michael's point, they're not Henry Kenny, Colonel Kenny, but you have people that you can tie the name back. Williams is a bit of an anomaly that we don't exactly know who William was named after. Was it William Mann? Was it William Aubrey, or William somebody else there? So if it was some of the other streets, I would not be in favor at all of a change where we have an historical figure that it's named after. But with the provenance of William in doubt, we're going to rename one. That's the one to do it.
All right. There's then I'll close the public hearing. And there's our motion to approve item number 20.
This is Roland. I move for approval.
Were you going to make an amendment, Mr. Molina? Or,
Second.
I guess not.
to do that ceremonial?
Yeah, the amendment could be that you would request staff.
I'd like to vote on it as is. My apologies.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Oh, I
So
didn't
the
understand.
motion and second is to approve as is written, right?
Yes, sir.
Who
All right.
seconded? Okay, Michael, you
I did.
seconded?
I mean, I don't
As is?
necessarily care, but I did second it.
Okay.
All right. Well, we could come back later with a motion that we put up some kind of a designation just for historical purposes, as opposed to this, because the name changes, that's what this is for, then if you want to add that.
No, and I'm fine with that. I would like, if you can come back, staff, with some information on the street name, whatever you have in the records, just to confirm Councilman Smith's comments.
Well, we did, so there was some correspondence back and forth this week between Alyssa, myself, and what Councilman Smith said is all accurate.
Okay.
William Mann is one of the founders, but there's no evidence that William Street was named after him. And then there is a Mann Street that people believe, M-A-N-N, that was named after him. So the key thing is it's one of the original street names. We don't know exactly who it's named after, I think, is the consensus.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, I'm fine with
I mean,
Yeah.
we can still move forward with where we're at. It's just that,
Right.
and we can still add the historical designation later. I just think we ought to move on. That's all. There's nothing to stop us from continuing with the historical designation. It doesn't have to be in the ordinance, does it?
I think he was trying to put it in the same motion, but same difference, I guess.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about the historical designation. I don't know that there'd be enough to get a designation. Just be a local information piece.
Yeah.
Okay, I just
All
talked to
right,
Miles.
the motion is for,
What is
what is
that?
that?
I'm sorry, Mayor, can I just add one thing? So we can bring back a motion, an agenda item as a motion, the next council meeting on this historical designation. You can vote, you can consider voting it at that point. We'll have the name laid out and kind of an idea of where the plaque could go, what it would look like.
We'll develop something for you to look at.
All right, well, let's deal with this. Item 20's got a motion and a second to approve as presented. No amendments, right?
Right, that's
And we
what.
close the public hearing.
Yes, sir, you did.
All right. All in favor, we need to call the roll.
Well, this one, and just to note, it does require 3/4 vote of the council to pass.
All right, everybody's participating, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay.
So for passage of ordinance number 20 on its first reading, Mayor McComb?
Aye.
Council members Fajardo?
Aye.
Hernandez?
Aye.
Hunter?
Aye.
Molina,
Aye.
Roy?
Aye.
Smith? Mr. Smith? Okay. Barrera?
Barrera says aye.
Okay. And Garza?
Aye.
Okay, the ordinance passes.
Greg Smith, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
No, we couldn't.
Did you want to vote up or down on that? Or
Yeah, I voted aye.
Okay, we couldn't hear you. Thank you.
Okay, we're getting Webex. Okay.
All right.
Aye.
Well, at least the lights didn't go out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Mayor, someone had a bad connection and I think they muted all of us.
Okay. The only thing I would caution you on, I don't want to make sure that, at least in my understanding, a sign with some historical information versus a historical designation. I think there's a significant difference between those two, and a whole lot of money.
Got it.
So, I mean, the historical information would.
Yeah, no, I don't think it needs to be all that.
'cause historical
I think you
designation-
just flip the signs around because
Yeah, just
normally
something to recognize that
you would have
historically that
the
used to-
ceremonial sign placard up on top. Now
Yeah.
maybe on this one we could just put Old William Road or Street
Right.
on top of.
And we can develop something.
Yeah.
All right.
So you can look at it on the next
Okay.
one. Yeah. for the
Okay,
next
now
one.
let's go, number 19. For some reason, it seems like we're going backwards. Rudy Bentoncourt, are you somewhere in the hemisphere?
Yes, sir. We're in the ACM conference room. Rudy, myself, and John Bell is on the line.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, so we'll adjourn the council meeting. Not adjourn,
Recess,
excuse
yeah.
me. I'm sorry. We'll recess the council meeting and go into the housing, Corpus Christi Housing Finance Corporation. And let me see who, Mr. Garza,
Thank you, Mayor.
you're going to have extra income this month. You're the president of this organization.
At least a couple of pennies worth, right? I'm going to call the meeting of the Housing Finance Corporation to call it in order. Can we, Rebecca, please call roll?
Okay. So Rudy Garza, president.
Here.
Board members, Mr. Hernandez.
Board.
Mr. Hernandez.
Here.
Okay, Hunter.
Here.
McComb.
Here.
Ben Molina.
Here.
Roy, Everett Roy.
Here.
Greg Smith.
Here.
Roland Barrera.
Here.
And Ms. Fajardo. Present. Okay. So we have a quorum present to conduct the meeting.
Okay, first item, public comment. Do we have any public comment on any item?
No, sir, we did not receive any.
Okay, we're going to ask for approval of the minutes for the October 1st, 2019 board meeting. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
A motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, Councilman Molina and Councilman Roy.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, treasurer's report. Well, I'm sorry.
Thank
All
you.
in favor of the minutes?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Okay, treasurer's report.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Heather Frolbert, Director of Finance. I have the treasurer's report for the 7 months ended April 30th, 2020. Our beginning fund balance as of September 1, 2019 was $405,979,000. The net change for the period is $68,997, bringing us to an ending fund balance as of April 30th of $474,976. Sorry, $474,976. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for our treasurer's report? Okay, there's no action required on the treasurer's report. Item number 6, motion to approve the plans for redevelopment of the Ward Building to include 10,000 square feet of commercial space 14 art studios, and 8 multifamily units, and to grant an extension of 1 year to close the construction financing for the redevelopment due to delays caused by COVID-19. Is there a presentation on this particular item?
Yes, President Garza, this is John Bell. I'm the local counsel for the Housing Finance Corporation. And as those of you who are on this board will recall, a little over 2 years ago, the board voted to approve the sale of the Ward building and related parking lot to Bill Hoover. And it's part of the condition of that sale, he would come back within 2 years and get plans for the development of the building approved by the board, and that he would close his interim construction financing. And he has been working, he has an application submitted for the National Register of Historic Places to get the Ward building on the National Register. It's currently at the Texas Historical Commission being reviewed for approval. And he also had financing arranged, but then that financing has been put on hold because of COVID-19. So he's working with another lender and actually hopes to get everything on its way much, much sooner, but nevertheless is looking for a 1-year extension on the time for getting the loan closed. At this point, though, we can walk through the plans for redevelopment to show you that the board to approve that so that no further board action would be required on this. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that the exterior will be restored to its historic nature with an awning along the streetscape. The side of the building that actually faces the parking lot was never part of the original facility because it was next to another building that was wall to wall beside it. But the side will be finished out in a way that complements the remainder of the building. The next slide. The first floor will be finished out in a white box finish for an art gallery space he's anticipating and possible restaurant space. It will basically be available for retail use. I don't believe he has any signed leases, but it should be available as first floor easy access storefront retail use. This building also has a mezzanine floor. If you go to the next slide, that will be similarly finished out in a white box finish and could be collaborative workspace. It could be additional retail space. But what he's looking for is just some option to get more people working and operating downtown. It shows you the second floor, which will be finished out. Next slide, please. The second floor will be finished out into 13 or 14 different artist workspaces. He has done quite a bit of development of that with local artist groups, and there seems to be a good demand for that to work in a kind of a collaborative artist space like this that will have access to the gallery on the first floor and the additional retail space to make that work. And then on the next slide, we have the third floor will be, they'll build about 8 loft apartments. This is the same developer of the Nueces loft apartments across the street, which started this whole process in 2008 and actually was our pioneer downtown project for a major redevelopment of living spaces, loft spacing in the downtown. The next slide shows just some pictures as to how the vanilla white box space will be finished out on the first floor. The following slide shows how that could be finished out. Next slide. How that could be finished out as part of the collaborative art space and as part of the gallery space available for this development. And that's the, let's see, I believe there's one more slide. Yes, one more slide to show some of the finish. If you could bring that one up. With one of the loft apartments on the, he has experience in doing this type of development in downtown with historic tax credits, and but he just needs additional time to get his interim construction loan. So the sole action for the board to approve or disapprove would be these plans for redevelopment. and then the granting of an extension of a year to close his construction financing. You can answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Anyone have any questions of Mr. Bell or staff? Anybody out in the cloud got a question?
Mayor, this is Rudy's presiding.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, old habits are hard to break.
Hey,
I'm sorry.
ditto what the mayor asked. Anybody got any questions for the developer or for Mr. Bell? Okay, if not, do we have a motion? Somebody want to make a motion to extend the timeframe?
So moved.
A year. Okay, we got a motion from Councilman Molina, second?
Second.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. And with that, this meeting's adjourned.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry? Was there a question?
John, did we need to get the plans approved as well while we were here?
That was part of the motion. It was all part of the motion that he read. So,
okay.
Understanding was the motion was made to approve what was on the agenda.
Yeah.
Correct.
I read it at the very beginning, which was to extend the timeframe and to
Approve the plans.
approve the plans, correct. Okay,
Okay, so meeting adjourned.
meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Garza.
We're ready to reconvene now. We'll reconvene the council meeting, and I apologize to Mr. Garza on that.
That's okay.
That gets us down to briefing item 22, which is a introduction presentation on the potential for a new tax increment reinvestment zone. Who's going to make that presentation?
I will be making this, Heather Hurlbert, the Director of Finance. I will be making the presentation today. I also do have the developer, Roberto Williams, available. Also, Travis James with TXP, who has been working with the developer on the proposal.
All right, and just for record and information, to my knowledge, there was not any information provided to the council prior to your presentation today, right?
This is correct.
So this is the first time that the council's being made aware of it?
Yes, to my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and this, just to add to that, this is for information only, no vote.
No action today?
Yes, sir, no
Okay.
action. Mhm.
Exactly. Okay, so can we bring the presentation up? Okay, so this proposed increment financing zone is number 5, and the development is going to be called the Bohemian Community. This is correct. And so so it'll be, the BOCO is what the name of the development is. Next slide, please. So just an overview on the project. This project is going to be located near South Padre Island Drive and Crosstown Expressway. It is a total of 216 acres located at that intersection. The development is proposed to have 999 multifamily units, 777 townhomes, and will include 450,000 square feet of commercial development. The proposed build out has a timeline of about 10 to 11 years based on what the market can absorb and is willing to take on as far as the townhomes. And there's an estimated value of about $320 million at the end of the 20-year time frame. The request from the developer is reimbursement of approximately $11.8 million for infrastructure that is needed for development, which includes streets, sewer, drainage, water line improvements, and the development of a 10-acre park, which is located within the development. Next slide, please. So this is an overview. You have Crosstown Expressway on the right-hand side with South Padre Island Drive at the top of the picture. This is agricultural land currently located behind Walmart and the AMC theaters. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the master plan. The developer is proposing this would be built in phases, starting out with your townhomes, moving into multifamily. You can see there where the commons area is, that's the proposed park. And then you have the commercial area in that lower corner there. Next slide, please. So the parameters that are being proposed on the TERS would be that the taxing jurisdictions that would be participating in the TERS would be the city, the county, and the Del Mar College District. The term of the TERS is proposed at 20 years, with the base year being tax year of 2020. Developers requesting 75% of the increment be used for reimbursement of these infrastructure costs. This TERS is a little bit different than the other TERS we have in place, as this is a petition by the developer. And so the developer's petitioning for the creation to create the mechanism for reimbursement of the infrastructure cost, which will be paid with the revenue generated by the growth in the taxable value. The total reimbursement ask is approximately $11.8 million. And based on the participation by the other taxing entities, when you look at the tax rates, the city's taxes are the increment, the revenue created from the city's taxes on the increment would pay for about approximately half of that. The total taxing dollar right now is $1.22 per $100,000 worth of valuation, and the city's tax rate currently is about 64%. As I said, the estimated increment that is supposed to grow over the next 20 years is approximately $320 million in value to the city. And the park and development would be covered under the TERS. It would be a 10-acre park, and ongoing maintenance would be paid through the TERS revenue for the life of the TERS. So the general fund will not be responsible for that maintenance. It would be paid out of the TERS. Next slide, please. So these are some renderings of what the townhomes are proposed to look like. Next slide, please. A floor plan of one of the townhomes. Next slide, please. So looking at next steps, what we're proposing is that the creation of the TERS would come to council on July 28th with a public hearing and the first reading of the ordinance. August 11th would be the second reading of the ordinance. And then in the time period of August to September, we would be taking interlocal agreements to the other participating entities to get their approval on the interlocal agreements to participate. Then in September, we would be bringing forward the project and financing plan, which would lay out what projects would be included and be eligible for reimbursement from the TERS. And then after that is adopted, then we would do the final negotiations with a developer and finalize the developer agreement. So that concludes my presentation. I am available for questions along with the developer, Roberta Williams, and Travis James with TXP.
Is this a public hearing? It's just a briefing, right?
Yes, ma'am. This is just a briefing.
All right. Anyone have any comments or questions on this at this point?
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to ask a question, please.
All right.
This is Councilman Hernandez. Is this for a single developer?
Yes, sir.
So we want to create TERS for one developer?
That is the request, yes.
Why wouldn't we consider something different here, like the EDC or doing something along those lines? If we're only talking about a single developer, it seems a little odd. Is there a reason for, going through the process of TERS? Because that takes up a lot of staff time. It takes up, council members have to show up early for meetings. If we're doing this for a single developer, it seems a little much.
So actually, this actually is because it is a developer petitioned TERS. The board act is a little bit different. Actually, it would not be the city council members that would be on the board. The board is made up of the congressperson, the Senate let's see, I'm trying to remember. There's 2 legislative representatives. There is a legislative representative from the Del Mar, from Nueces County, if they participate. And then the remainder of 5 places on the board would be landowners within the TERS area. And so this, because it is done by petition versus a city-formed one, it is a little bit different.
So why not do something else? I mean, like I've been advocating for public improvement districts. If you're talking 1,776 total units, that's $300 a year per for a PID if you're doing it over 20 years. That's like $30 a month per unit. Why would you? I mean, why would we get into the whole process with the TERS?
That was the proposal that was brought forward to the city, and just that was where we're moving forward with.
Yeah, let me try to answer a little bit on that. So there's more, the development, if you were to put the map back up, has commercial development. So it's not just solely on the value of the single-family housing that would be done, or the duplexes, or the townhomes, I mean. And we did work with the developer on several alternatives. We talked about a PID with the developer. We talked about city participation, like a participation agreement. But the latter would be, we wouldn't be able to, we didn't have the financing available. It would have taken, it would take us too long, we thought, over time, to come up with the additional money that would be needed. So in the end, the TERS was the best choice for this development, and it was suitable for the developer, suitable for the city. It's not uncommon for a TERS to have a single developer. There were several in San Antonio where there was just one developer of the TERS. So we weighed all those things into consideration before we agreed that this would be a best development tool for this particular development.
Should be Peter or Miles?
Okay, I would suggest we get a better understanding of how this TERS works differently from the other TERS in the city, because it seems like I just need to have a better understanding of this, because we're taking away, well, please provide a briefing for that.
Yeah, we can brief you, Councilman.
If the don't want it, I'll take it individually.
Yeah, we'll brief you more. It works identical to all the other TERS with the exception of the board. The board would be more representative of the developer than the city in this case. But there's still
I'm concerned about that, because that kind of hides the spending of the money from city council.
It does.
It's what?
So the city council would still be is going to be the final approver on any financing plan. And so the city council is the ultimate decision maker on these. So even though there is not a city council representative on the board, the way that the agreement will be written is that everything has to go to city council for approval. So if there's any changes in the finance and project plan or in any of the agreements, then it would have to be ultimately approved by city council.
Okay, I look forward to your briefing.
I have a comment. Mayor.
Anyone else have any questions?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Paula.
Oh, thank you. So this is, the property has been sitting how long? Long time.
Forever. Well, decades, I guess.
I mean,
decades.
yeah, I mean, 50 years, I think, at least.
It's been, everything around it has been developed with the exception of this
Right.
parcel. Yeah.
And I would think, I guess, to, Gil, I understand, I guess, some of that concern. However, I think that if I remember correctly, that has an ag exemption, so we've got $29,000 that we're collecting from that property. And we have a developer who wants to invest $200 million and therefore create $32 million, and therefore I would think attract other development around that. I think that's the problem in that area, and we desperately need development in that west side of town. Right. So I'm very supportive of this, and I think it's a huge win to the city of Corpus Christi. I think you just answered my next question, which is, why would this be different than another TERS? It isn't.
It's not, yeah.
Okay.
It's not different than any other TERS.
No.
We have to follow state law and how
Right.
TERS is developed. And, yeah,
Right.
So it follows the state law enabling
Okay.
TERS.
And everything is being reimbursed from that.
Right, this is a good example of a no-risk development for the city.
Right.
If the developer doesn't perform, we don't pay any money. We only pay
Okay.
money if there's increment, so there's no risk to the city financially.
Okay.
All the burden is on the developer. If the developer wants the city's participation, the recommendation is close to 12 million. They need to perform over the 20-year
Okay.
life of the TERS. If not, we don't pay anything. So,
Great.
Yeah.
No, and I want to reemphasize, we're collecting $29,000 right now in tax, valuation, and it's going to go to 32 million. So,
Right.
anyway, great. I think it's a great project.
Would that be the baseline? $29,000?
No, that's the tax that's generated. The baseline would be the value of the property. Do you have? Yeah, that's the tax amount that's collected, but the baseline would be what the property's valued at. I don't know if you have that.
This is Travis James with TXP. The baseline value is about $2 million with the ag exemptions.
Okay.
That's not the revenue, tax revenue, that's just the value.
Well, but, okay, same difference.
not
then.
looking
The
at the
value.
value if it's
That's
2
not the
million.
same
It's
difference.
not the
The
same difference,
The
but-
taxable value
We're
to
gonna
the
get the
city is
tax
$30,000.
Yeah.
Right, but
What's
my
the base
point
tax
is the
revenue that we're gonna
value.
use before setting it as the baseline?
No, I meant the value of that property, you're going from something it's never, ever been in 50-plus years to something that we could only dream about it becoming, especially in that part of
wasn't my
town.
question, Paulette. The question was, what was gonna be the baseline? Was it gonna be the taxing with the ag exemption, or is it gonna be based on full value?
No, it'll be based on the full value. Right now, if the developer decides just to let it sit for another 70 years because it was incorporated back in the 50s, all right? Right now, it's a potato and a cotton field. Yeah, it's a potato field. So with the ag exemption, we're picking up about $29,000 in ad valorem. So if we do nothing, then that's most likely what's going to happen until there's something else appealing that comes to it. So in this particular case, and that's not, the 32 million doesn't even count the sales tax revenue that we'll receive from all the construction.
Okay, I understand that. I'm asking the question as to what is gonna be the base value of income that we're gonna get once it goes away from the ag exemption. As I understand it, when you go away from ag exemption, you have to pay back the 3 past years from value and taxes for that. Is that, well, aside from that, what's gonna be the increase in ad valorem taxes that we get right off the bat?
You just put a value of $2 million on it, so that's what your taxes will be based on.
Right.
Yeah, but if that's, that would assume the ag exempt would be removed.
Mhm.
If the developer removes the ag exemption, and the TERS is approved, then the increment goes into the TERS fund.
Okay, well, then that's gonna be a sticking point, because then your baseline is the 29,000, so we'll get 29,000 for the next 20 years.
No,
it's not going to be
the ag
29,000.
exempt will be removed, so it'll be valued at a
Okay,
higher value.
so you're saying, just so I'm clarified, let me repeat what's being said here. If we go forward to the TERS, the ag exemption will be removed, and that becomes a baseline on the value of $2 million, and whatever the ad valorem taxes on the $2 million is, comes to us from the get-go.
No,
Mr. Williams, will you confirm that?
No, what happens is if the developer would remove the ag exemption, and then assuming it becomes a TERS, from the date it's a TERS, the incremental value goes into the TERS fund and is reimbursed to the developer up to the city's participation level.
Okay, so what we're saying is that the ag what they're paying in taxes for the ag exemption will be the baseline.
No.
No.
We can put that into the agreement, that once the TERS is approved, it'll go on the full market value.
Yeah.
So what is that amount in ad
2
valorem
million right
taxes, is what
now.
I'm asking.
Yeah.
It's 2 million.
2 million with no improvements, but the developer will begin to improve, and so.
So 2 million is what we get off the get-go.
Well, if that's what the assessed value is, you'd have to talk to Ronnie about that.
Well, what's the assessed value? Is it?
It doesn't make any difference right now. It's what the tax appraiser comes in and says it is, once it loses its exemption, he'll go out there and appraise it.
Okay, let's, for our next go-around, I just want to have clarity here as to what that amount, the actual amounts are. Because I think.
Well, we can
everyone
get that. This is a workshop,
Yeah, we
right?
can get it, yeah.
Yeah, we can get that information.
We'll get that for you, Councilman.
Anything else? Mr. Roy?
So I know that there's been a couple comments that said that this TERS isn't like the existing TERS. And one of the things I just want to talk about is that, again, this TERS is basically for infrastructure, which is a lot different than TERS 4 or 3. But the other thing I was curious about, and I would like to have some more information on it so the next time we have this discussion, is that because we get our money on the back end, correct? And if they have to perform, I mean, I shouldn't say we get our money, but we are paying that money out on the back end. They have to perform. They have to develop and do the things that they say they're going to do. But that 11.8 million?
Yes, 11.8 would be the city's participation.
Yeah, that participation, that, we don't pay that all at once, right?
No, that's based on, that's over a 20-year period. That's only if development happens, so it can generate.
So we pay that in increments, essentially.
An increment, right.
Okay, I just,
Yeah.
that'd be nice to be able to see that model so that we
Yeah,
can just get an
okay.
understanding, because, you know, sometimes it's luminous when you sit there and think that all of a sudden the city's gonna have a price tag of 11.8 million.
No, yeah,
But
that's
it really doesn't work that way, so I
Right.
just would like to see that illustrated for council and the public.
We'll
Thank
do
you.
that. That assumes a 20-year development plan, and I might add, it's a 75-25 split, so the city would retain 25% of the growth, and then 75 would be provided to the developer in reimbursement.
Because what I was thinking is, and maybe I'm just putting some quick thought to this, as the development increases and as our reimbursement increases, really our revenue's increasing. So there is an offset there, and I think it would be good just to be able to see that.
We'll show you that.
So thank
Yeah,
you.
Today was just kind of an initial conversation, show you the big picture.
I'm getting a little detail, but I think
No,
for
that's
next
good, no
time,
problem. Yes,
that'd be
sir.
great.
Yeah, good input, thank you.
Mr. Molina?
Thank you, Mayor. So far, I like what I'm hearing about this project. I'm a big fan of infill projects, and this area has a lot of potential. This is an area that is ripe for revitalization, and I'm really looking forward to hearing and learning more about this project as we move forward with it. I really think it could be a good thing for not just that area, but for the entire city.
Mr. Garza?
Based on my calculations, when I take and I multiply 2 million times the 64, 65 cent tax rate that we have, they'd be paying about $13,000 for the next 20 years, I guess, in that particular tract of land, regardless of how much it develops.
13,000?
That's
It's got to be more than that.
Right now, our tax rate is 68 or 65 cents, 64.6 something cents, is what I remember. That's per $100 valuation.
Oh, for
So you take-
$100 valuation?
No, that's what our 68 cent rate is. So you take the 2 million, you get it divided by 2 million by 100, what gives you 20,000 increments times the 64, 65 cents. So our income would only be about $12,000, $13,000 for the next 20 years.
Well, that ain't right. I pay that much on my building over there, and it's nothing.
Well, I mean, just
We're going to look at this again if that's the case.
my calculations might be wrong, but that's what I'm figuring. They said 30,000. I'm thinking it's going to be a little less than half of that. Now, I lived right across the street. I lived right there in Greenwood, right next to that Coca-Cola plant, for probably 12 years of my young years. So it was it's been like that for a long, long time, and I'd love to see that area develop. But the only concern that I have is the administrative cost. You just saw the administrative cost in TERS number 4. It practically ate up all the incremental tax valuations that came up, and very little was actually left. If we create enough TERS, we do one for every single developer citywide, then we're going to find ourselves being able to defer or lay off all our administrative costs and probably not have to pay any at the any of it through our rest of our income, our revenue streams. But for one tract of land, I've always been of the feeling that TERS should be for revitalization. This is not real revitalization. This is greenfield development. You are developing a greenfield with tax increment money. And the challenge that you have in getting investment in older areas is why you create these TERS, so that you can dole out certain incentives for people to continue to build and reinvest in those older areas. When you start creating TERS and you start giving out dollars for greenfield development, you're going to achieve exactly the opposite of what I think you need to achieve in order to be able to become a good, efficient, operating city. We have spread ourselves. We talked about right now the incentive over in Cal Allen. Again, that's something to fill a need for Steel Dynamics. But then we are encouraging development in an area that's far away from our city center core. Same thing with Moses Agassi's development in the New London area. That also, all the things that we're doing out there, we're encouraging development in our outer areas, and that's going to continue to take away, continue to spread our efficiency as a city. This area, I believe, will not stay vacant for 60 or 70 more years. That area is too close to all the city's core services, and it gets to points, and I'm not suggesting that we don't incentivize. We need to incentivize infield developments. But in greenfield, it takes less incentives than it requires for you to redevelop it. It's costlier, and you're at a market disadvantage to redevelop old spaces and old buildings and old areas than you are in developing brand new greenfield spaces. So again, I'm not against developing that area. I just think that we might have some other tools that we could possibly use in order to be able to incentivize the development of that area. I don't think a TERS is necessary for that particular development. I guess I want to listen to some of the dialogue next week and get more information. I did get a packet and I saw what's going in there. I've got, like I said, again, concerns about what we're going to do. You're talking about sales taxes and all we're going to achieve and all the sales tax we're going to receive from those areas. Right now, in our current environment and the way that things are headed, we are going to see erosion of our sales tax dollars, regardless of how much we grow. Internet sales are going to be going up. Brick and mortar sales are going to be going down. And so even if you have retail space be successful in that area, it's going to be at the expense of cannibalizing other retail spaces we have citywide, so it's going to be a wash. And so again, the one benefit that we have is tax, real estate or appraisal, the increase in appraisal values, and that's where we get our tax. And we're going to be giving it away. We go, and we follow this model for all TERS going forward. It's not the same case with downtown. It's not the same case with North Beach. But I just think that we're going to be stepping off on thin ice going forward. Thank you.
Any other comment? Well, just a couple things.
Yes, sir. As the developer, is it all right if I chime in here?
Sure.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, councilmen and women, and Mayor, thank you for your time. I just wanted to say a couple points about the project. Firstly, it is a performance-based project and TERS. In the event that we don't succeed, in the event that the project does not go forward, does not generate any extra taxes or increase or improve the area, we are out in investment, we are out money, we are out. It's a risky project in that area currently. I can understand Councilman Garza's points about infill and being in the city, but when it's city infill, mostly it already has access to existing streets and utilities, and this one does not. It was such a large piece of land that it was, I think, a little overlooked. and so streets and utilities were not put in as it went along, and that's one of the main factors that have prevented that left that large hole in the crux of Corpus Christi right there at SBID in Crosstown. The area is underserved. It isn't the south side, it's the west side, and this TERS allows us to keep the housing under 200,000, which is very difficult to do, as we heard earlier with Mr. Walker, who's receiving assistance, and that's for 280,000 homes, he said. So we're offering what we call workforce housing, and the commercial potential that comes along with that is fantastic also, because it's not only the commercial that is currently not doing well, but allows for business parks, medical facilities, other types of commercial providers that are in need in that area. It is a 10 to 12 year project. It's quite a long ways, a lot of years to put in. The public infrastructure. It is only public infrastructure that we request reimbursement on. And just to clarify one more point on the utilities, the 15, the miscalculation, 30,000 is currently what that property pays to all entities, to Del Mar, to the county, and to the city. That's why Councilman Garza's 15,000, 13,000 city tax calculations is correct, because that's what the city collects. So it's even less than 30K just for the city. It's 30,000 for all entities. Like I said, we've had the property for 30 years. We've thought about doing things. Other people have attempted to do things. Brazelton at one point attempted, but it's very difficult with current prices. It's a hard market building homes and keeping them affordable and getting people into good quality homes. And I think this is possibly exactly why this kind of legislation was put into place, and why TERSs exist, to allow something like this to get started, to kickstart it. And we have a lot of local people, a lot of local businesses, a lot of local professionals that'll be working on this, that'll be motivating it and impulsing it forward. So that's really all I have to say about that. I didn't mention the park, but it's a large 10-acre park, hundreds of trees, jogging tracks, farmers market area. It really would be a boon to the west side that I think hasn't received as much attention as parts of Corpus, and will soon be a very important corridor, particularly with what's coming out in the London School area and where Corpus Christi has to grow towards. So thank you very much again for your time.
Somebody else had a question or something? One more. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, if the dollars generated by creating the TERS is to go to public infrastructure for that area, then I'm not opposed to it, to be honest with you. But if it's going to go for other bells and whistles and things that are going to be to attract or market the product that they're going to sell.
Yeah, the dollars will be used for road infrastructure.
If it's for infrastructure and we don't have a way to finance the infrastructure, come up with a bond to finance the infrastructure, then again, I might not be opposed to it. If the language that you put together in the agreement has to do with monies used for public infrastructure,
Right, that's what it'll be
then
used for. Yeah.
that's a horse of a different color.
That's what, yeah, it would be used for it. That's why one of the alternatives was for the city to build the roads, maybe in a bond program project or some other way, but we didn't have available financing right now, and the developer has been wanting to start the project, so this helps him with more certainty and funding, and that's why we opted to support this tool.
We don't have any public utilities in that area right now?
There's no roads in the development. The roads would be like arterial roads, or collectors, I should say. And so there's none in that whole development. And there would be roads built in that picture that was on the PowerPoint, it would be more, the roads would be beyond the development of the housing. So in other words, they'd lay out the subdivision with the road and be reimbursed over time. And then the housing would start, and then commercial development, the park, and so on.
Whatever language we come up with, it looks like there's majority of the council's supporting it, but whatever language that we put together for that agreement is going to be critical, because again, the numbers on the TERS are going to, the city's going to be outnumbered on the TERS by representatives of developers. So again, I'd prefer the language at least be able to protect the taxpayers and.
Yeah, that's good. We'll put that in.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, the developer wanted a couple of things, or didn't want, but had several options, and some of the things we didn't recommend. And so the money would be used for public infrastructure only.
Any other questions? Mr. Roy?
Yeah, I just wanted to expound on that because that's why I was touching, I said that in the beginning, that it really differentiates itself from TERS 3 and 4. It's really kind of more like what they've done out in TERS 2, except that's for multiple projects. This would be one for one developer because it is infrastructure only in nature. So that to me makes it a lot different in terms of, and I agree that if that's how it's going to be utilized, to make sure that we have something in there so that years down the road, somebody doesn't interpret that different and do something different. So
every TERS has a finance plan and a development plan, and in there, that's how that we'll prescribe for the 20 years.
Right.
And only council can change that. So, you don't have to worry about somebody coming new and doing something different.
In essence, Mayor, it really is, Mr. Zanoni, a different type of TERS, because typically you've got all these little projects that you can pay for within. This is just for infrastructure so that he's able to create, everything around it. So, yeah, it is, to Councilman Hernandez's comment, it is different because we're not going to do small projects with this money.
Yeah.
It is strictly infrastructure.
Right.
Great.
Any other comments? Just a couple. One, before we go through all the exercise, and I'm not sure what all the legal things are in creating this thing, has there been due diligence on the financial strength of the developer? I don't need an answer yes or no, but we've been on this Ferris wheel before, and I'd like to know there's financial wherewithal before we put staff through a bunch more of the ringer. And it appears that the value of TERS are commercial development, not residential. So I'd like something in the TERS that says the commercial development's going to take first before the residential, if you're going to develop value. And the commercial may never develop, and all you have is a bunch of houses, and you're not going to generate a whole lot of money. Can you even put residential area? You have to exclude residential area, don't you? Well, on the island, it's all commercial, I think, or there's some provision on the island TERS that it only, at the time, was either vacant land or commercial land only. Or maybe I'm wrong. Greg, you want to hop in?
Let me see if he's on the line. He's been having some trouble.
Falling asleep?
He's listening.
Mayor, this is Travis James with TXP. You're allowed to create a TERS that has residential. The rules about the amount of residential when it's created, but this TERS would comply with state law.
Okay.
But you could have, in other words, you can have it only resident. In San Antonio, we had some TERSs that were just housing, period. There was nothing else in them but houses. So it's up to the.
The state law is at the time of creation. You can't have more than a certain amount of residential at the time the TERS is created. And this one is all greenfield with a little bit of commercial.
All right, but now you're saying you can create TERS 100% residential? So they've changed the law since the early days.
Yeah, you can't have existing residential and put the TERS on that, but if you're developing residential, if it's a green field like this and there will be residentials within the TERS, then yes, you can do that.
Okay, well maybe that's what the island, it excluded all existing residential. That probably is where it came, okay.
Mayor, excuse me, Mayor, just one little quandary that I find myself in with this development is that as much as I'd like to develop the commercial and I'd like to get someone in there, it's a bit of the chicken and the egg. We need the residential to fill in to draw the commercial side of things. So we can't force the commercial and then there's hundreds of acres of cotton and potato fields next door. So what we want to do is build up the critical mass, the demographic, and then have people there to make commercial viable.
Well, that's just differences of opinion. I mean, and that's fine, but I just have a difference of opinion. And then I think Rudy hit on it, regardless of whether it's this development or future development in the next years, commercial development's going to take on a whole new look in the future. And I think these big box stores and strip centers and office buildings, you're going to see them hurting for the next several years from vacancies because people are accustomed now to working at home. Just there's going to be a flood on the market. Prices are going to come down. I mean, that's just my opinion. Housing might still stay good, but I think commercial office space is going to be and retail space is going to be a real challenge for the next several years. But anyway, one, the due diligence, that's a question that I think needs to be asked on any project somebody comes and asking us to participate in whatsoever. And I don't know that we've ever done any or I haven't, this is the first we've heard about it, so you may have done your due diligence, you may not have. The second thing is somewhere there needs to strike a balance that commercial gets in there because that's where you're going to generate the revenue. I mean, I understand it from his side that you got to generate the mass, but most people, you want to develop a neighborhood, go out and stick a school in the middle of a cornfield. There'll be all kinds of development gather around that school. So that's and when does I think there needs to be some performance, particularly if it's going to be just a private sector TERS is what this amounts to is, in that you create a TERS August 1st, 2020. You start collecting the taxes on the existing tax base on January the 1st, 2021. No development for 5 years, but yet that tax is going into that TERS for 5 years at the ag rate, I guess, or does it lose ag exemption once you create a TERS? That's the other question. We need to know that. Talk about the chicken and the egg. So the money that goes into that TERS for 5 years, let's just assume for discussion purposes, nothing happens. Over that 5 years, is the city going to get only 75% of the tax that went into that? Or you're saying we're going into 75-20? Or we get 25?
We get 25. Yeah, the city retains 25%.
Well, I think we ought to look at a 50-50 split personally. Because
Mayor, if you don't mind me clarifying, this is Travis James. The city will collect 100% of what it's collecting today.
Of the base value.
It's only sharing 75% of future growth. So everything the city or the county is collecting today still flows to general fund. It's only future tax revenue.
Future tax revenue on what tax base?
So the developer has to build on new development. So he has to build his project for there to be net new tax growth in the TERS.
So it's only on the improvements, it's not on the land?
It's based on anything above where we are today. It's the baseline value of 2019, you still collect that tax revenue, and it goes to general fund.
But the land.
My question is today with agriculture exemption, that land's probably taxed at $100 an acre. You take that ag exemption away, it's probably $50,000 an acre or $20,000 an acre. Are we going to be we're going to be collecting taxes on $100 an acre ag exemption value or at retail value? commercial value. That's what's going in. What will go into the TERS? Agriculture value or market value?
I think we'll have to negotiate that. We'll have to double check that because I'm not sure if it's,
That's a pretty significant difference.
Yeah, well, we will bring that back to you, and give you an answer on that. It is a little bit different because of the ag exemption, but we will double check and make sure, what that value will be.
And Mayor, thank you. That was the exact question I was asking earlier.
Yeah, no, that's a huge difference.
Yes, sir. Mayor, if I may comment on that. The current ag exemption would be lifted step by step or phase by phase, and at the moment that it is lifted, it not only concedes the rollback taxes to the city, but it also then takes on the full, takes away the AG exemption and now pays full taxes, and at that base rate, it's still 100% to the city. Only a future increment on that would be put into the TERS.
Okay, and and I'm not an accountant, but there's a look back period that when you sell agriculture, you got to go back 3 years, pay the
That's right.
rollback taxes. Yeah. Well, I think while you're in your discussion, I think one, we need to get, and this is not questioning anybody's financial strength, I just think it's a good business, that we do some due diligence. In my opinion, I think we need to emphasize commercial first. How long will it be in effect? Is this proposed for a 20-year TERS, 15-year TERS? I've heard 75%.
20 years. Yeah, we had said 20 years initially.
I'm concerned that every time we create a TERS, you're taking away from the overall availability for money to be spread throughout the whole community and focusing it just on designated areas, which puts a lot of pressure on the overall community to fund things. And I think this is what Rudy was getting at, that you're losing 25% of the tax base that goes in to pay for basic infrastructure for the community to put in and focus on one area of the community. So I think, I don't have a problem with the concept, but if you keep getting more and more of these things, you're going to have less and less for your total community-wide infrastructure and financial obligations. So we just need to, I think it's a good concept, but we need to realize the impact it's having. Am I wrong on that, Rudy?
No, the incentive though for him to develop and add value to the property though is the timeline. You got a 20-year, right, TERS, so it's going to mature, it's going to end. At the end of its life is 20 years. So he's got to rush to get as much value in that he's not going to, that he's going to be able to reach and get the infrastructure reimbursement back out of. And so the developer is incentivized to develop as fast as he can, right? Because at the end of the 20 years, that goes away. As long as
it can be renewed.
That's the challenge, and that's for all the TERS, all the TERS, right? Is if that looking forward, you don't hold fast to the length of the TERS or the timeline of the TERS, and you renew them, then it's going to slow down, to take away the incentive for them to develop in a faster manner than they would otherwise do.
Okay. Well, I think you've heard the discussion, all the ideas thrown out there. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah, real good discussion.
I like the idea, and the concept of the project is great, and the location I think is a good place to have it. So let's get the nitty-gritty worked out. Anything else on this one? All right, then we'll close our briefing on the item 22. We don't have any executive session issues, do we?
No executive session items.
All right. And just as a matter of information, Mrs. Nolan, hold on. The question Elizabeth came and asked you about, is that something that we can do here?
I think I have to double check. I know I'm not sure about the city flag the state flags, we do need the governor's authority, and the federal flag, we can't lower those on our own initiative.
Okay.
But I'll see on the city flag, we may be able to. The question was, can we lower the city's flag in honor of Officer Williams in the police department
And the security guard?
security person at the airport.
Well, I think we can write a letter requesting that.
Yeah, and we may not have to. I'll check with Miles and others to see.
All right.
Yeah.
So anyway, if we need it, we can certainly get a letter request either under
Yes.
mayor's or your signature. But anyway, that's all right, moving forward with lowering the flag in there.
Can we also light the Harbor Bridge up blue?
Yes, we can do that. I'll check with Keith Selman to see if it's available. If not, we'll do it as soon as we can.
Okay. Anything else in the good to the organization? Again,
sorry, Mayor, we have a 5 o'clock press briefing on our normal press briefings at 5 in this area.
Well, let me, a couple of things. I know you're kind of aware of, obviously, all this COVID stuff, but just so I don't know that the council really has a grasp on the time consumption that this whole COVID thing has taken on Peter and the rest of the staff. It's just wearing them out. It is very time consuming as well as emotional, I guess, but they're doing a great job, but it's got to be, they'll tell you it isn't, but it's got to be impacting their ability to get their other part of the work done. Now, Peter can delegate a lot in his, but the team's all trying to pull the mule wagon as fast as they can, but it's a very time-consuming thing in the meetings and the Zoom meetings and the Webexes. It'll drive you crazy. But that comes with the territory, and we are meeting a lot early in the mornings, late in the evenings, weekends, conference calls and things. So just wanted you to know they're working hard, and again, Annette's doing a great job with hers, and the first responders and the hospital people and everybody, they're working hard. Just keep them all in your prayers for giving them rest and encouragement and strength. We'll get through all this mess, but I think everybody will be glad when it's over. The sooner the better. So pay attention to the rules. Well, here's one. Pay attention to the rules. Don't be fools. There we go. We got a new slang. With that, I'll adjourn.
Hey, Mayor, real quick question here. On that briefing, in the future, can we make sure that the presentations are in the agenda items for city council to review ahead of time? I feel like this presentation on the TERS, I wasn't prepared enough to ask the right questions in place. So if we can have those, and also if you can send that out to us, and since we've already seen it in the backside, so you take a look at it.
Yeah, we can do that. We'll do that.
Or at least some backup on what presentation's going to be.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think
ma'am.
it's a good idea. Just quick little question, comment. Has that item gone to the county and the others for?
No, I don't believe so. Right? It hasn't gone to the other entities.
Well, the Nueces County Development organization has been briefed. I know that. And then just also, Mayor, just a little tidbit. The EDC did review, or they did a cursory review and did acknowledge that the developer is financially capable and has done other projects. So I'm not sure if staff had brought that up or what have you. But yeah, so I know that the developer's been making their rounds.
The boards haven't though, right?
Well,
Yeah, but
what
they
we were
haven't made a
presented today didn't
presentation.
provide that information, and what I'm saying is if there's going to be a briefing to the council and the public, it needs to be complete.
Absolutely.
I mean, and I understand going around talking to council members and getting your ducks lined up, but it's got to be complete information at a meeting like this and for the public's understanding. I'm not against the project. I'm just just saying, we got to have the information, and I mean, nothing was mentioned about due diligence, qualified or unqualified, and I'm not questioning that. I just think, you know, some people come in here blowing and going, they show us lots of nice, pretty pictures, and we wait and get excited and nothing happens, but, because of whatever reasons. And so, and I wasn't aware that all the other you say the other entities have already approved it?
No, sir, I'm not saying that at all.
Oh, okay.
They've
They've had it presented to them.
They've been briefed,
no, sir.
Okay.
not in a formal setting.
None
Okay,
of them,
all
none of
right,
them.
Not
okay.
in a board
Just-
meeting.
All right. All right, well, our meeting has been adjourned, so I guess we'll adjourn this discussion.